like to call to order the special meeting of the Emory Unified School District Board of Trustees. Roll call, please, Ms. Tamery.
Member DeWin.
Here.
President Dice.
Here.
Member Affelt.
Here.
Member Ash. Member Pats.
Present.
Great. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Any agenda, any changes to the agenda this evening? Or are we good to go for what we have? Sounds like it. Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Have a motion and a second. Any objections to that? We'll move accordingly. At this time, we have item D, public comment, an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items not on the agenda this evening. Anyone? Anyone? Please, come on up. Mr. Gibbs.
Okay, we're good. All right. I have. Okay, this is SSC public comment on the LCAP process and document. See, I have a 3-page document that I sent in. I'm not sure if you have it in front of you. But it also fits into 52062, which is straight off the California Ed website, which is basically the statute that outlines the process for instituting the LCAP. And so this is basically direct comment on the continuance of the narrowing down of the LCAP goals. So there were a number of well-documented, well-commented on meetings that did happen all throughout the district between probably October and March, where, you know, every meeting people were going around giving things long lists. So everybody's seen all that information. That's been very well documented, and the job, as far as there, was very good. However, that was an initial round, and after that round, there was never a follow-up round to narrow down those priorities. But that didn't mean that the members of the community did not continue to, because the members of the community did get those documents. They did evaluate those documents and had many, many meetings to narrow down those documents, because the members of the community fully understood that there was only going to be between $180,000 and $250,000. The members of the community fully understood that 200 things were not going to get funded, and members of the community did not want specific. When I say members of the community, I mean at a DLAC meeting, they specifically did not want a laundry list, meaning a list of 26 items. At the SSC committee did not want a list of 22 items. The teachers did not want a list of 22 items. And I quote from each meeting said, what always happens is we always do these lists, and we get these lists that are like 2 pages long, and then nothing ever gets done because you go to a board meeting and the board has 23 items, and of course, the right item's not going to get funded if you present someone with 22 items. What you need to do is present 1 or 2 items, or maybe 3, and then give strong reasons why, and then of course, it's a lot more likely that you're going to get something in there, okay? So what this is actually what all of those groups came together and compromised. So this does, of course, every item that's in the LCAP was mentioned in the process, but they all aren't realistic. Like, for instance, in the advisory budget meeting, someone wanted a database to monitor student performance. Well, we don't even have an IT person right now. So, and that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we don't have the time or the bandwidth. We don't have 2 principals. So we don't have the time or the bandwidth to adopt a database and try to implement that. So obviously that's not going to be a priority. So that's just an example of something that did come up that doesn't really need attention of the LCAP. So the first thing is the bilingual parent-teacher liaison a communicator. That, by the way, is not a secretary. This person is not, their job should not be to sit next to the principal and do the principal's menial tasks. We have people that can do menial tasks. What the parent-teacher liaison coordinator is specifically for is, I need more than 1 minute. There should have been time to properly respond to these in public comments, and honestly, I need more than 1 minute. So what that communicator is for, since I'm the only one here, I don't think there's going to be too many people speaking after me.
Can I ask you to clarify? You said number one was the bilingual parent-teacher.
Yeah.
By number one, do you mean?
Number one on the
num-
document that I sent in to Lisa Tamery
Okay,
and
all
the
right.
superintendent.
And these are the priorities
Yes.
that you think the SSC.
These aren't
prioritize?
priorities that I think. These are priorities that the SSC, the DLAC, the PTO have met, talked about, voted, agreed upon.
Okay, I just want to know
And extensively
if
debated.
you're ranking and who you're ranking from. I
Exten-
got it. All right, go ahead.
Budget, everything has been reviewed, okay? So, and by the way, we will be presenting the school site plan, but after March, no administrators attended the SSC meetings. Administrators, that means 3 of them, attended every single meeting before. So the site plan, which has been completed and submitted to the superintendent and to the office, was completed without their help. Anyway, getting back to the parent-teacher coordinator, over the past few years, that relationship between the parents, the teachers, and the broader district has just completely fallen apart. So what this person would do would be specifically to bring parents back into the fold, bring teachers who want to do more volunteer, bring them back into the fold. Also, reach out to parents. We have a lot of parents that are linked up with businesses and organizations, and kind of rebuild all those pathways that have just fallen apart. And they would also reach out to students who are having trouble getting to school and having truancy issues, academic issues, disciplinary issues. We got, 20%, 15% from foster care. So this is not just, hey, this is a person to speak English and Spanish. This is a person, and it's district-wide, this is a person to really kind of get us on the right track and give the new superintendent, new principals the support they need to bring the community together. That's why they're not a secretary, because we don't want them bogged down doing office work. That would only be $75,000. And then the rest of the money in that particular option, we came up with 3 options that kind of go together to give an example of how to use the money. The rest of the money would be open, but would be used for targeted professional development. And so the targeted professional development wouldn't be just handed over to the staff to dictate to the teachers what they want. What it would be is teachers, that we have teachers that have been educators, that have been principals, that have been administrators, that have degrees, a lot of experience for more than 8 years. And so they say, hey, look, we've got a lot of talent here, but we don't get a chance to teach each other. And so we might have a teacher that's weak in math, but we have a math coach for the Silicon Valley Tech Initiative that could coach them. So we want targeted and specific things. Also, the DLAC committee said, we want regular teachers, for instance, a physics teacher to know how to, well, we don't have a physics teacher. So for instance, a history teacher, social science teacher to know how to teach social sciences so that someone who is not a native English speaker, or someone who speaks Punjabi or Spanish, would know how to do that. So that's what I mean by targeted teacher, based upon the teacher's specific needs, professional development. So that would leave like $150,000. That could be throughout the district. So that leaves the board and the superintendent and the new principals a lot of leeway to determine according to their training and what they think is important. Because what we didn't want to do is usurp the authority of the principal and the superintendent. The second option, again, these options are not designed to have all of the above, but for the board, the superintendent to consider, hey, maybe one of these or some combination of these. So the second option would be a physical education teacher, an increased prep time, and a science teacher primarily in the secondary school. And so what that would be, the physical education teacher, we've had a lot of problems. I mean, kids being prevented to go use the bathroom in the 2nd and 3rd grades because of bullies, getting beat up on the yard, discipline issues because of all the subs, the lack of physical activity for the 2nd to 4th grade in terms of like organized physical activity. So the teacher would be kind of like a hub for making sure there's order in the yard. So they're not just a physical education teacher, but they're kind of like organizing everything. So
6 minutes.
one teacher said, hey, when we have recess, students are playing here, students are playing there, but there's not one person assigned to every area. Then
Mr. Gibb,
yes.
can I just pause you right there?
Mhm.
I think because it is tied to the LCAP, I don't want to lock you into the public comment section. If you wouldn't mind letting us get through to the study session and insert
Honestly,
there.
I just don't have the time. I would, but I got a call last night. I drew up this document. I, by the way, hate coming in last minute, especially since I've been trying to do everything ahead of time. But that's the way it's been. Like I said, people didn't show up. Administrators didn't show up for the last 5 SSC meetings. So this is what I'm stuck with because of the July 1st deadline. So I realize this is inconvenient, but
So
there's
it's
been
not
significant
to,
inconvenience put upon us.
Not to make it further inconvenient. I think it just needs to, because we do have this on the agenda, just putting you in front so we can just get out of public comment, because it's not the best place, because there's not an opportunity to have interaction if there were questions.
So we should be there in what, 10 minutes?
Less than 10 minutes. It's like
Are,
3
are
minutes.
you able to
Okay.
hang out another 10 minutes?
I've
Mr. Gibb?
got till about 7:30.
Oh, you
Okay.
covered.
So,
covered in
so,
there.
and that way you're not limited to the public comment time.
Okay.
Because we
And
don't,
I'm,
we just want to
I'm
keep
open to
it
having Mr. Gibb
consistent.
issue his public comment before we embark on the LCAP, because
Yeah, that's fine.
the post discussion comment's not going to be for a couple hours. But you
Well,
can
this
start us off.
document is written, it's given to Dr. Rubio and Lisa Tay Marie. If you want a copy of it, then
Okay.
it's available for you.
Okay. No, and we'll be right back. But I just want to make sure we get through it and out of the public comment, because it seems to be very relevant to LCAP specifically.
anywhere.
So, yeah.
Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just so if there's any other members of the public regarding public comments on anything that's not on the agenda, now's your opportunity. All right. Moving on, we do have item E, resolution honoring Mary Esther Augustine this evening. Am I-
It's the mute button.
Testing? Okay, good. Yes, the board, I know many of the board members know Mary Esther Augustine. When I was here previously, I had the pleasure of getting to know her and her work. And this evening, we are presenting to the board for adoption a resolution recognizing her contributions. I won't read you all the background because it's in your board packet, but for the purpose of the audience, she had served the district for 45 years in a variety of capacities, touched the lives and assisted hundreds of students. In the years when I was here, she was really focused on helping students apply for and be accepted into colleges and universities. And so she went basically on a reduced work year, and she is kind of officially retiring now. And so the purpose of this resolution is to recognize and honor her contributions, and we're recommending the board adopt this resolution.
Any board members have any questions, or and I have a comment. I will be attending the retirement celebration, and we'll be able to actually present this. So I'll be there Sunday doing that. But I was a student under her at many moons ago, and definitely was one of those students who benefited from her knowledge of the college process, as I attended the college that I did my undergraduate from support from her. So you know, I wholeheartedly am excited about being able to bring this forward to the board and support what's been drafted. So any other board members have questions?
Well, you know, I can definitely support it. I know the remaining 3 of my colleagues, they don't even know Ms. Augustine, but Ms. Augustine was a pillar in this district for many, many, many years. And it's kind of ironic. I went to an event earlier in the week celebrating the 50 years of the civil rights movement, or passage of the civil rights. And I was able to hear people like Howard Moore Jr., Claiborne Carlson, and Angela Davis. And after leaving, I mean, I was very inspired. And I really, you know, they talked about, you know, education. And when I kind of reflect on the work that's being done here and some of the individuals who have, I mean, labored at this within this district to really for the benefit of children and student learning and achievement, I actually thought of Ms. Augustine for the many years that she had been here, and for the hard work that she had given to students and the just the mentorship that individuals really look towards her as a pillar in this district. So I can definitely support someone who has served 45 years in education around supporting student achievement and student learning. So, and can you say where the reception will be at this Sunday?
I cannot.
Oh,
I
'cause
barely
wanted to go-
remember
I
what
wanted
time.
I wanted to go.
Sorry.
Okay, well,
I'll
you'll tell me
after.
offline.
I can't
Okay, that's
remember the name. I
That's
feel
fine.
bad.
That's
I just
fine.
know where to go.
Right, okay, no problem. But yeah.
But any other comments, questions from board members of the public? Anybody? Dr. Bow?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I had known Mary Esther Augustine personally from the time I first came into the district and saw the work that she did. It didn't matter what the need was. She was there to serve the needs. And what I saw more than anything was how she was just remarkable in the way she worked with students, especially moving to get them into college and to keep that moving forward. But I was telling Melody earlier that in other parts of my life, I had come repeatedly across people who had gone to school with Mary Esther Augustine. She was one of a handful of African American students who went to Cal from West Oakland before affirmative action, when it was really a tough row to hoe. And some of her colleagues are people like Lionel Wilson. I'm trying to remember who the judge is now. There's a
Judge
whole...
Ramsey?
Yeah. They all went together. Cedric Robinson, who is a professor who started the African American Studies Department at UC Santa Barbara, and they all kind of have stuck together and stayed in touch, and it's just been a whole group of people who've made such remarkable contributions. And the way she stayed with education, with this district, and has worked with kids was just really remarkable. So, yeah.
Phenomenal woman. Any other public comments? With the pleasure of the board, I would move to adopt or approve the resolution 21, 2013, 14.
I'll second.
Yeah, and any objections, and then I'll ask for a vote. All right, Ms. Emery?
Yes.
President Dice,
Yes.
Member Affelt,
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Member Ash,
Absolutely.
Member Pats.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And as I mentioned, wherever I'm going on Sunday, I can't remember the name, but I'll be there for sure and be able to present that on behalf of the board district. Thank you, Ms. Emery. Thank you, staff, for putting that together. Now we'll move into item F, study session on the local control accountability plan. Perhaps if you'll introduce it, and then we'll just reconvene or have Mr. Gibb finish out his section. That would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, President Dice, members of the board. Just a few kind of prefatory comments, really coming into this whole process kind of at the last minute. But what I've learned about the LCAP and just the whole LCFF new funding model and the LCAP that comes with it is that everyone I've talked to, including people at the State Department and people at our county office, are all saying the same thing, and that this is an evolving, developing, continuing fluid process. And a number of people in those positions have also said and we're not sure exactly how it's going to change, but we know it's going to change. So, you know, it's one of those not so common processes, concept. It's not. I've been in my 40 years through 4 or 5 major restructuring efforts that cause districts to have to respond to kind of a new state direction. And this is probably the first one that I've been part of where, in some ways, the refinement of this process is going on at the same time that districts are trying to comply with the statutory requirements. A perfect example of that was in a conversation with our county contact person today. I had the opportunity to go to a meeting up at the State Department 2 weeks ago, at which time the comment was made, well, districts have to address all 23 priorities. I mean, although there are 8 stated priorities, if you take each one and unpack each of those 8, when you add them all up, there's 23. Unless you eliminate API, because API will not be the same as it is before. So then there's 22, but 23 if you count them all. And so in a conversation with the county today, the question that I asked our county contact person was, well, do we have to address all 23, or are we talking about addressing 8? And her comment was, well, all the counties heard from the state in May, early May, that the expectation or the thinking now is that you have to address all 23. And the feedback from the counties was, you can't do that to the field in May when they're trying to finalize their plans and have the boards adopt before the end of June concurrently with the budget. So Alameda County's position, we're told, as well as that of many other counties, is when they review the plans for approval, they're only going to look to see that all 8 priorities are met, not that they're unpacked for 23. Now, having said that, over the last 3 or 4 days, we have made every effort to try to unpack those 8 priorities and try to specifically identify what components of each of the 8 priorities the specific actions and services are intended to address. It may not be perfect. People can argue whether it's truly aligned to that, but in hours of staff conversation, when we looked at each of the actions and services that are proposed, we made every effort to ensure that there was alignment to not just the priorities, but the sub-priorities, or so-called sub-priorities as well. Just to get closure on that conversation, the county did suggest that probably next year, the next refinement of the LCAP process probably will include the need to address all of the sub-components of the priorities. So, only to illustrate this kind of ongoing, evolving process in the refinement of this process, and based on feedback from the field, I'm sure, as well, and the feedback from the counties that are responsible for approving the plan. So, all of this to say that I'm sure that with all intentions to try to implement this process here, with the intent of the statute, it probably wasn't perfect. There are probably areas certainly we can improve. As the board and the staff move toward the development or the revision of the LCAP that you ultimately approve next week, but as that is looked to be revised and improved, then I think the commitment of staff is to ensure that the letter and intent of the law is followed, partly because the staff will have more time to refine the plan. So what we're presenting this evening to you is, I think, staff's best effort given the circumstances of transition that occurred in the district, and given the fact that there was only one staff person who really could work on this. It wasn't a staff of 3 or 4 people. And I think given that as we prepared the draft for this evening's study session, I think generally feel very good about what is there. Yes, it needs to be refined. Yes, it could be improved. But ultimately, the goal is to meet the county's expectations for what is necessary in order for the county to approve the plan, and any future refinements, whether it's developing a local user-friendly version of it for public consumption, can be work that can be done certainly later in the summer or early in the fall. But I think staff we felt under the gun because we know the board needs to approve this next Wednesday. So our first priority was to ensure that the plan met the requirements of the county in terms of their accepting and then reading and ultimately approving the plan. And then secondly, try to make the plan as readable as we can versus the, I think, 2 other versions of the plan that you've seen in the last 3 weeks or so. So with that, just as kind of some introductory comments, I would like to suggest our process for this evening. Originally we thought, well, maybe we can go through sections 1, 2, 3 again, and then go through the prioritization process. I trust the board had a chance to review the actual sections 1, 2, and 3, 3A, B, 3. C and D will be prepared following this evening's meeting for the board to have by early next week based on the decisions the board makes this evening. But we think that it would be maybe more efficient and effective if we were to go through a prioritization exercise and then go back and review sections 2 and 3, and primarily because the county was very clear they do not want to see anything in the plan that's not funded, either with new funds or with existing funds. And so some of these sections of chapter 2 may be, section 2 may be taken out, particularly if they're addressing new proposed areas. In any case, what ultimately ends up in the plan, of course, has to address all 8 priorities. And a number of things in section 2 are currently ongoing and currently funded by the district space grant. So we thought if you can bear with us, we can do the prioritization exercise relatively quickly, I think. And then after the board looks at how, as a board, you have ranked the priorities, then we go back and then discuss those parts of sections 2 and 3 that will remain in the plan and take board comment on that, rather than take comments on all of 2 and all of 3, only to find that, in fact, they have to be taken out of the plan before we submit to the county. So if the board is okay with that, I'm going to facilitate the prioritization process.
So just so that conscious of the previous public comment section, if Mr. Gibb could please come up to the podium again and perhaps finish out, because I think we were at, I think I have 3 items, but if you wouldn't mind completing that section for us, and then we'll move into our study session, the other section.
And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gibbs, can I say something before you
Yes.
start? You know, I have no problem hearing what you have to say, and I think what you have to say is important. But in your comments, can you just try to refrain from not, bashing staff and administrators in our district regarding maybe some of the things that you feel that they didn't do right, or some things that are not going right? And I understand, your feelings towards that. Hold on. I can take all your comments, and I think everything you're talking about, like I said, is valuable. Okay, but that's all I'm asking.
I think that what maybe you don't realize from your chair is that when you run an LCAP meeting, so like our SSC meetings were focused on the LCAP and the statute from the day one. We didn't have like one meeting at the end of the year. That the number one challenge that we had to breach as a SSC was the inability to be heard by the staff members.
And I understand that.
So,
and I hear you saying that. I hear you.
I've made every attempt.
And I think every board member here knows that.
But I've made every attempt to.
And I know it's frustrating.
It's not frustrating, it's reality. If I was frustrated, I would give up. I've made every attempt to eliminate petty, small, personal issues and just focus in on what are the budget items and what are the process. But when, by law, staff is required to come to SSC meetings and they don't come, then it's very hard. And when you have to literally chase down information to get budget, to get academic data, and you've gone out of your way to make sure that everyone's invited and known and noticed, And then you get to, hey, well, don't say anything. It's like, well,
No, it's not.
what do you
no.
want me to say?
It's not say anything, because I think everyone in this room have heard your, complaints. Everyone in here knows how you feel.
It's
You're
not how
here-
I feel. I
you're
don't think
here
you know that for the
you're
past
giving-
4 months,
you're
no one came
giving
to our
us
meeting.
your advice and your recommendations from your committee people, regarding what should go in the LCAP. That's what you're here today at this time doing.
Okay, so
Correct?
what
Correct.
did,
So before we go with
but
the
could you
try
clarify
to,
what I did? What did I say that was
So
not
can I-
factual, that was
Can I
opinion
interrupt
based?
real quick, because you have valuable time, and I want
Yes.
to make
Yes,
sure you
yeah,
get
you
that
do.
done,
Mhm.
your piece done, and y'all figure it out outside of here. Because I think because I want you to be able to put your
Your
story
input and
in
have all
terms
that
of
together.
priorities
I
on the
agree.
table, so we know what they are.
And I support that.
And I agree, I got that.
I
But
support that. Okay.
please
I
carry on as
apologize.
you would have before you approached. Thank you.
I think
Okay,
that,
Mr. Gibb, can I just
yes.
summarize what I heard,
Uh-huh.
your priorities? 'Cause I just want to make sure I got your outline in my head.
Mhm.
And number one, bilingual parent liaison. And then,
there's a written document that was sent that was supposed to be distributed to you that actually has it in already, so you don't have to take notes. You
Okay.
just don't have
not
it.
having that in front of me, and I'm sure hopefully we can get that while we're going through our process. Number two,
Hopefully.
targeted professional development.
hmm
And number three was.
It's not number 3. So actually, there's one item.
Yeah, so that was a that you had like one item with a couple different options.
Yeah,
So
so
this
that-
is
that-
option,
'cause
number
that
two
comes
is a
together-
couple of options.
Because that comes it together under both of those are district-wide, so they affect Anna Yates and ECSS. Because we didn't want something that's going to be all ECSS or all Anna Yates, right? Because that's not the
Okay.
spirit. It also has to hit
So it's
the
a 2A,
most,
and
the
2B?
students that are most in need. It can't just hit the most outstanding students or just the black students or just the Hispanic students, right?
Yeah, so it's number two, and there's A and B, professional development and PE teacher. Again, I just want to get the outline and the priorities right.
The PE teacher's a second is B.
B.
Superintendent, do you have this copy of this document? Does anybody have a copy? Because I wrote a document at the request of the superintendent.
Well,
So
just
someone should have a copy of the
well,
document.
let me just for a little bit of clarity, Mr. Gibb, a couple things. Well, one is you and I spoke yesterday at 2:25 p.m. in the afternoon,
Mhm.
and I called you in response to a previous meeting that you and I had because I wanted to make sure I returned and followed up with you. And I had said to you in that conversation that if you wanted to, based on what you had told me about the process, give me information so that I could be well informed and make sure I know as best as I can the priorities. If I make any recommendations tonight to the board or asked to, that I can do that. I didn't at any time, and I'm sorry if you thought that I meant that I was going to pass on anything you sent to me, but I had asked you to, if you wanted to fill me in as best as I could. So
Yeah, it's a challenge, Superintendent, because, I've come to the board multiple times specifically about the LCAP, specifically about the time. For instance, I've been asking about the meeting of the LCAP for the Parent Advisory Committee since January. And I got an email in January saying the first meeting will be the first week of February, which would have been great because you would have time to have 5 or 6 meetings. The first meeting didn't happen until March 27th. So at the first meeting, what was explained, I already knew about the LCAP, but was explained, which is procedure, this is what the LCAP is, and then you spend 20 minutes. Then there was only one other meeting, which is documented here in the LCAP. So there was one meeting to explain what we're going to do, and then there was another meeting to explain to the Budget Advisory Committee what they did. So where were all the meetings to determine what the Budget Advisory should do? I mean, when you selected a new superintendent, you didn't have 2 meetings. You had 7, you had 10. When you make a decision. And so when someone says there was only 2 staff members and 1 staff member involved, honestly, there were a lot of people that wanted to get involved that were more qualified than me, 10 plus years experience educating, et cetera, that volunteered, that wrote documents. You've got a site plan which you'll get next year, which proves, hey, these people will write a quality document. It's a very well written document that we wrote without help. It's quite impressive. So that could have been a part of the process. So there was more than one person available. And I had to fight for that meeting and finally got it after harassment almost, right? And then it's like, oh, but wait a minute, man, you're rushing in at the last minute. When that wasn't the case, come on. Do you want a copy of all the emails?
So, so probably.
what are your
just,
priorities? That's
I was
what we
gonna
want.
say.
Hey, well, we got off course, not by me. I was just going to
No,
go
I was
down the
gonna
list.
say, we could probably get a
Right.
copy of it though for our discussion. But if you
You've-
wouldn't mind
you've
taking
got a
us through
copy,
it,
Please,
yeah.
through the
give
list.
us your
Yeah,
list.
you got a copy, but like a lot of things, it just doesn't get to the board.
you
You can
just
do
confused
whatever
me
you
with
want, but it doesn't
option.
necessarily get to the fore. That's why I'm here. And by the way, I hate that I'm here at the last minute because every effort was made to come early,
It's not really last minute.
to
'cause
get on
we-
the calendar
Mr. Gibb, we
in
haven't
a
decided.
non-confrontational
We're
way.
about
But
to
I'm up against the
decide.
July 1st deadline, so this is my last chance unless I want to whiff and wait till next year. So I'm only doing what I've been forced to do, and I would have done it another way if I could. And I'm not going to apologize because every effort was made to do it the right way. This
No
isn't
one's-
the right way, by the way.
No
This
one's
isn't the right
asking
way,
you-
but every effort was made to do it the right way. I'm just going to go down this list of documents. You have a copy of it. If you would like to read it, it's well written.
We have not decided anything. We are about to decide. What we want to hear is your list.
I was giving it to you until I was criticized for, I didn't make any personal attacks. I just told the truth. And by law, number one, by law, staff members are required to attend SSC meetings. And by law, and it's quoted in this document, the number, they're required to, the superintendent is required to present the LCAP to the DLAC committee. It's required to request comments specifically and written comments from the public, which the superintendent has to respond to before the board can submit this to the state. That's in the law. I didn't create that, okay? So those things were not done in their entirety. Some of them were done, but they weren't done in their entirety. I don't write this stuff. So if you don't like it, you got to talk to the state of California. The physical education instructor is meant to bring calm to the campus, but also if the teachers do not have to spend their, I know that teachers are multi-subject and they have the capability to teach more than one course, but we don't have a science teacher in many of the grades. We don't have a music teacher. We don't have a physical education teacher. We don't have a foreign language teacher. We don't have specialized social studies and math. So there's only a limited amount of multi-subject teaching one individual can do. So the physical education teacher isn't just, hey, we want the kids to have this education, although many of our kids are 3 times more likely to have diabetes, so really we should have a special physical education program. The idea is that by having that position, the teachers would then have more prep time, because in the high school, the teachers right now have like 3 times as much prep time as teachers in Anna Yates, okay? So the teachers saying, I would do more, but I don't have any prep time. Then also right now we have a situation where teachers, like say in the 3rd grade, they work together and they work their things out and they do their homework, but say the art teacher does not have a chance to commune with the 3rd grade teacher. The art teacher does not have a chance to commune with the 7th grade teacher. And they said, well, we would like to kind of cross-pollinate to provide a more rich environment. So the strategy of the physical education teacher isn't just about kids running around the yard. It's also to provide maybe professional development time to help students that need tutoring, maybe, or whatever special needs in an academic sense. So it's in partnership with other things, and of course that would require the input of the principal, the input of the superintendent on how best to execute that, right? So I wouldn't know how to best to execute that, but if we have the time and the budget and the planning, then that would be part of that deal. Then the next thing that would go, that's still in the second topic, would be that would leave enough money for a science teacher at the secondary school. Now, I have background on the basic curriculum for science, which is going to kind of be restricted to certain targeted grades because of testing, because of impact. That is fine. However, science is important, right? And we're supposed to be a tech campus and da-da-da-da-da. So even if the science teacher was full-time at the high school, that person could also do survey. So maybe not a full-time teacher, but let's say, okay, in certain semesters, they could do certain targeted science programs in certain grades. So let's say, for instance, like the 3rd grade doesn't really have science the whole year, but maybe they're teaching full-time in the ESSS, and then they come down and give kind of like a survey to give exposure in between the standard science teaching. Once again, this is just a proposal. It's not something that's written in stone, but it's in light of the fact that there's a limited amount of dollars, right? So the next and last one is C, which is 2 credentialed substitute teachers, which I've talked about before. And this comes from a variety of sources. So the reality is that there's oftentimes you walk in, there's 4 or 5 teachers missing. It's a fact. Okay? So I mean, I have pictures on my phone of 8th graders sitting in a class with kindergartners. Okay? So that's happens every single week. This last semester it was every single week, at least once, many times, multiple times. So the idea is that a full-time person employed by the district, 1, the district overspends on substitute teachers. 2, a full-time person would be able to have to show up to work every day. If there's no need for substitute teachers, that person could assist on the yard. If we have classrooms, we have certain classrooms, particularly in the middle school grades, where we have some individual students with known discipline problems, attention issues. That person could go in to maybe support a staff member and just kind of relieve them by kind of being that in-classroom teacher's assistant. We had student teachers who were teaching classes they weren't supposed to teach. We had student teachers who were meting out discipline, meaning I've had multiple conversations with parents where student teachers who were not allowed to decide about discipline were assigning students to clean up the lunchroom for a week or 2. So it may seem like, oh, okay, this is kind of like a pie-in-the-sky thing, but trying to correct real issues. Okay, like all of these issues were discussed in depth at multiple SSC meetings, but we just don't have the opportunity to present. The second thing, those are the things that are written down. The other things that are required, that are items that are in here that aren't really substantive as far as most of the leaders in the community, as far as when they really came down to them, like the middle school sports, hiring full-time teachers in all instructional programs, a tech instructor. I've talked about how that shouldn't be an LCAP before. I think I've buried the bone on that, on how that could be funded with Title I funds and funds that have already been allocated. Parent education, parent university, internships and jobs, other administrative staff salaries for testing and walking around the campus and doing kinds of evaluations, and AP courses. I'm in strong support of all of those things, just not necessarily with the LCAP funds. The AP courses are obviously for the most outstanding students. I do think we should have more AP courses. I do think we should do more internships, but there are other methods to getting that stuff across than the dollars that are really supposed to be targeted for the students that need the most help and what we as a district are in urgent need. So if parents are afraid for the safety of their kids, that supersedes an ideal curriculum that someone may dream up in a room, but when you walk the campus, is not a reality. Okay, so we're just dealing with the realities, not what, there's other stuff that we wish, but we wanted to eliminate all that. Because we'd look like fools if we came to you with a list of 22 items, right? And so that's critical. The other thing is timeliness. Guys, you got the right to make whatever decisions you have, but time is undefeated. I can't beat time. You can't beat time. There's never been a man or woman that walked this earth that can beat time. We miss too many deadlines, period. That's got to change, okay? You make a decision I like, great. You make a decision I don't like, great. Either way, I'm rolling with you. Make it on time, because none of us have the right to be late. Am I understood? Because that hurt us in the principal search. It's hurting us right now with our staffing concerns in tech. It completely derailed the LCAP process below the level of the staff members in this office and the board. You're fine, but everyone else feels excluded. And when I mean everyone else, I mean the DLAC committee, I mean the PTO, I mean the SSC, I mean the teachers. And I don't mean 2. Yes, there are 5 or 6 teachers on Annie Yates campus that solidly support staff decisions. There's maybe 5 or 6 on ESSS that solidly support. So what does that mean? There's 8 or 9 that don't care, and the other 50, 60% really felt excluded. So we're kind of a majority nation. I'm not saying that there's no support for things that have done, but it's not 75%, and everybody knows that, as evidenced by the recent exit of certain staff members. So those are things that are really, really critical. And the other thing is that this was not a process at which people were not interested in, not informed, not willing to participate, not willing to go. There were members who attended SSC meetings in the beginning of the year, because like usual, with the committees that have weight, because they do understand how things work, when they thought that they could control the agendas and the items and the production, they were at every single meeting. As soon as they couldn't, they were at no meetings. Regardless, they were not at the meetings of the writing of the plan. They did not present data. They had to be chased down in their offices, and the data had to be extracted from them. That is what happened. And yet a document was produced. I'm sure that they've done this in the past, and I'm sure people failed. But I don't have excuses. So I'm not going to come up at the end of the year as the chairman and say, because the principal and other administrators didn't support what we were doing, I couldn't get my job done, or I did a piss poor job. Like, I don't operate like that. But that doesn't mean that it was wrong what went on. And so that has to change. And some people may think like, okay, well, you're not being friendly, you're not being whatever. But the reality is, every time I talk to a teacher about how to implement, I have to confront hey, they talk about the last staff meeting. Hey, we had a staff meeting about our schedule. We're just sitting there banging our heads into the wall. I have to confront that at every single step. I have to confront discipline issues with the parents every single time. So it's not like I want to do this. I want to, literally have the board member from UC Berkeley's computer science program that has gotten 6th graders to do the same work that UC Berkeley computer science freshmen do. And yet, I can't recommend him because I don't know what he wants to come to the district, but what am I sending him into?
Mr. Gibbs, are you through with your priority?
That was the experience.
See, from the time you stopped with your priorities to now is what I asked you, could you refrain from doing? That's what I meant right there. So I'm taking it right now. You're through with your priorities. You've been through with them.
I'm talking about the experience.
So,
I am talking, your voice is heard, our voice is not heard. It's not legal to not listen to us.
I hear you. I've been hearing you.
So, just to bring it to a close, in terms of process, I think Mr. Gibb has been very, very forthcoming with what has not worked, and appreciate absolutely. And I think with the comments made earlier, we have a lot to do, and appreciate the what you put in front of us. I think has been very helpful, and I can't say that I knew every ounce of all of this, so I've just imagined hit the tip of the iceberg on so many things, but do appreciate you bringing forward the what you believe were prioritized items from the conversations you've had and from those different groups, and I think that's very valuable to our discussion this evening. But in terms of process, I do want to acknowledge that I'm fairly certain, because of so much that has happened, and it being a new system and a new set of framework and rules, that we didn't do everything that we should have done, and we have a lot that we've learned from this. The board has definitely learned a lot from this process, and in terms of expectations, as was mentioned earlier, Dr. Rubio knows what those are. Just from the sheer experience of being part of it early on in this, the end of the year. So I would just hope that you be patient with us and understand that we're frustrated with you in a lot of ways, just because we just kind of at the end right now. But I just want to make sure that we do have your priorities that you mentioned, and I think we've solid there. But in terms of process, I think that's a continuing conversation. But in order for us to, I think it's now time for us to prioritize so we can at least get to that next level. And I know you said you had a time commitment. I don't want to keep you here as long as 20 more hours at all. But do want to acknowledge that your leadership and your guidance through the process and what you've been able to do this school year has been tremendous as a parent. And look forward to that continued support, and not to, I'm not trying to.
It's not about continued support, and it's not about being personal. But you're talking to the wrong person as far as reaching out. Because every effort was made to reach out, and reach out politely, reach out in private, over email, one-on-one conversation, advance notice of what was coming, concern.
message gotten.
And by the way,
Message received.
I'm not without sympathy for some of the situations that staff members find themselves in. You just can't choose not to show up. That doesn't mean you didn't work hard.
And just so the board knows, if I may say, I did appreciate the information and the time Mr. Gibb has given and the history that he's provided for me. And if the board does want to know the incoming superintendent's recommendations tonight, at any point in the evening, I do have some recommendations among the items, and a couple of them do overlap with the recommendations provided by Mr. Gibb. So I wanted to say thank you, Mr. Gibb, and that just so you know, later in the evening, in case you're not here, some of my recommendations, if the board chooses to ask me, actually do overlap with at least a couple of yours as well. Not just yours, but from the groups and the information you provided. So thank you.
That's fine.
All right, well, I appreciate getting the comments from Mr. Gibb and the groups that you've been working with, and I appreciate.
Oh, and by the way, I left out the direct intimidation of my SSC board members because that isn't appropriate for public meetings,
I appreciate it.
but there was plenty of it.
You can leave that on. All right.
Thank you. So I believe now we have that section, and I appreciate your letting us adopt that and pull it into an appropriate spot in the LCAP and out of the public comment section. But we'll now move on to the next phase, and we do have that initial information in front of us.
Great, thank you. So just a few brief comments about the prioritization process in terms of dollars. I think let me just first say that all of the items that you have in your plan obviously will not get submitted on our final application to the county because, again, the county only wants to see a plan for items that are funded either with existing dollars or continuing or new dollars. So I think every effort, as Ms. Allen has indicated before, that all of the items that got generated from the various stakeholder groups, there was an effort to capture all of those in the current version of the plan. But the board also knows that the total costs on the low end, and there's a range here because for some of the personnel costs, it depends ultimately on where that individual comes in on the salary schedule, but probably on the low end, the total cost of the items is somewhere in about $600,000 range and could go as high as $1 million depending on the personnel positions. And there is actually there's $241,000 largely from or all from the supplemental concentrated grant the district received for this coming year. And so it is the bottom line number that the board has available to allocate its priorities to is $241,000. With that said, however, the board is familiar with the budgeting process in the district, and the board certainly may be able to fund additional items in the as early as the early fall when the actual cost of items approved in this plan are actually determined. And I'll go through those as I explain each of these items before you go through the prioritization exercise. Also, the board is aware that the process of closing the books on the 13-14 year occurs through the summer months, July and August, and at some time at the end of August, early September, we have a pretty good unaudited actuals that are calculated on the prior year budget, and it's possible that when that is completed, there may be some additional carryover monies from the prior year that would be available to the board. Of course, you have to be careful that you don't spend one-time monies on ongoing expenditures because that actually has the impact of creating an ongoing structural deficit. But and there's always the opportunity that other grants may, the district has submitted a number of grants that are pending, and in some cases, such as a federal grant, we won't know till September, but as if grants are received by the district, in many cases, some of those grants could be used to pay for costs that perhaps the supplemental grants paying for supplemental concentrated grants. So that would free up those dollars then for the board to be able to allocate to other priorities. So I guess I'm trying to encourage the board to say that, you know, what you approve this evening as the highest priorities doesn't mean that the other items on the list that end up with a lower priority won't be able to be funded at some point. Also, I just want to remind the board that Mr. Bonet in the budget study session indicated to the board that for 15-16, the year after next, based on the FICMAT calculator, it would appear the district would be entitled to approximately another $200,000 in supplemental concentrated grants. So, so there is likely to be future opportunities to fund some of the other priorities, and of course the priorities may change over the course of a year. So, with that said, what I'd like to do is you have, I believe, in front of you.
Can I interrupt and ask pertinent questions related to what you just said before we move on? Number one, just for clarity's sake, we have 241,000 in supplemental base. Or no, just supplemental concentration, I mean. And then we did have an increase of 85,000 in base. And I asked Mr. Bonet, because many other districts in doing this are looking at that increase too. But according to Mr. Bonet, that 85 is spoken for because we lost other revenues, like from the gear up from the federal and other things. Is that right? I just want to confirm that we don't have our base increase.
I think there are a number of components to why we don't recommend that the 85,000 increase in base funding actually be viewed as new money. I think part of the Gear Up grant ending and the need to transfer some of the ongoing expenses to some of the staff that were funded under Gear Up will have to be funded through the 85,000. There is the step and column increases that all districts customarily encounter from one year to the next. There is also, and I understand the governor signed the budget today, but we have not received from our consultants, our sources like school services, the actual detailed breakout. I think they'll have a governor's budget conference scheduled in July where 90% of superintendents and CBOs attend to understand how the budget plays out. However, we had heard that there was some compromise between the Assembly and the Senate regarding the STRS contribution, or the increased STRS contribution in the first year. I think the governor's proposal was an increase to 9.25%, and I think from the current 8.25%, and what we understood was that the compromise was at 8.8%. So there may not be as much of a call on the 85,000 in order to cover any potential increases in STRS content. So those are the main things: step and column, the ending of the Gear Up grant, and also the whatever the actual percentage increase to the STRS contribution becomes. I should mention one thing about the Gear Up grant, however, though. Ms. Allen went to a technical workshop presented by the Federal Department of Ed yesterday, and we are in partnership and also getting assistance through Townsend Public Affairs to submit a new application for the next funding cycle for Gear Up. And so we're hopeful that we will be able to be refunded for Gear Up.
Okay. So, in conclusion, I'm comfortable not touching the 85 at this point as well. On your last point, I had not heard there was any change to the STRS contribution. Is that right? Okay. What I had heard is that the governor added a little more LCFF, about $250 million more than he was proposing in the May revise, to cover what would effectively be the sum total of the district's STRS contribution for the year, which is, you know, less than 240 million or whatever they're adding, so that we might have that piece covered one way or another, whether it's reduction or an addition of LCFF money. But we will figure that out.
Yes.
John, to answer your question on the STIRS, it was reduced from the 9.5% originally to now 8.88% when the state adopted the 14-15 budget.
Okay.
And then just FYI, on the Gear Up this year in 13-14, it was covering part of Alacrita and the high school principal FTE. And because of the expiration of that grant at the end of this year, those FTE has to be back in the general fund.
Yeah, got it.
Thanks, Dora.
Then my next point, and we might need Dora to answer the question part of it, is the budget that we're to adopt next week is a budget for 14-15. The LCAP is actually a 3-year plan, right? And it has columns for actions and expenditures for 15-16, 16-17. And it seems to me that we ought to be putting in there at least our current plan, which we can change next year in our annual update if we don't like it anymore, for what we're going to do with that 200,000 more in 15-16, and I think it's what, 300,000 more. We go up even further in 16-17. So we ought to know what those numbers are, and what we don't, pick for 14-15 tonight, we can pick to start in 15-16, and if not, then 16-17.
That's correct. We did ask the county about that. The county said, well, we're just, for purposes of the financial review part of the plans that are submitted by districts, their business service department will be looking at the ability of the district to afford the 14-15 year, understanding that districts can make adjustments to any of the components of the plan at 15-16. My guess is, though, just having looked at the budget and looked at the various items on here, that for anything that you approve this evening to be included in the budget that has a compounding increase, that the increase ought not to be such that it uses up all the 200,000. I mean, if you just eyeball it, and if there were, a few personnel positions that you added, the compounding increase with step and column and so forth shouldn't get close to using up the 200,000. So my anticipation is you will actually, at that point next year, when you're looking at the 15-16 budget, that you ought to have new dollars available to allocate to other priorities.
Can we get those dollars on the table tonight? A more precise figure of. It might have been in Mr. Bonet's presentation last week.
Yeah, part of the problem in doing that is depending on what items. Let me just give you an example. If you were to fund a full-time teaching position, there are a number of them here. We have pegged that position at potentially the highest step and column that a teacher can come in, if you were to hire someone from the outside, and plus the salary-driven costs, plus the most expensive benefit package, which is why we have 103,000. In reality, when all is said and done, and if you give us authorization to hire a full-time teacher for whatever subject, and the total cost of that teacher comes in at 75,000, then technically the next time you go at looking at what dollars you have available right from that one position, you could have $25,000 to $28,000 unallocated. So it's difficult to project for 15-16, not knowing what the actual numbers will end up being for 14-15.
I just wanted to add, I'm sorry, I don't think it contradicts anything that Dr. Sugiyama said, but in the same vein, just in terms of prioritization, if there's something that you think that, hey, let's go ahead and at this moment, let's kind of make this the number one priority we think for the following school year. I don't think there's anything to, why wouldn't we, if you, yeah.
No, and I think as you go through this exercise, I think that what your next order of priorities for funding will be can then be looked at staff as an estimate for what may be possible in 15-16. So with that, what I'm going to propose we do is we go down each of the items on your funding unfunded priorities list from section 3. That we go down each item. I explained to you how we got the cost estimate for each item. And in some cases, there's an interrelationship between some of the items on this list, among some of the items on the list. So I want to make sure that before I ask you to assign relative priorities to each item, that you understand how we got to the cost number. Obviously, these items on this list have more information about it in section 2 and 3. But again, for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to assume you had a chance to review that. If you have, before you do the prioritization, if you have any questions about any of the items, staff will take those questions, attempt to respond to them, and then we're going to have the board individually assign priorities to each of the items. I think there's 22 items on here. And then we'll calculate an average score for each item, and then the board could visually look at what the quantitative analysis looks like, and then I think the board should spend some time talking qualitatively about the items.
So, John, what document are we actually looking at?
This
Okay,
document here.
gotcha. I'm gonna write it.
Okay.
Okay. Appendix D.
It's a separate table in the bottom corner.
Yeah,
That's not Appendix D.
it says no. It says LCAP goals and proposed funding priorities, unfunded priorities from section 3.
I got you.
Okay, so let me go down each of these items.
But
And-
before we do this, because like one item was raised by Mr. Gibb that's not on these 22, and that's the 2 credentialed substitute teacher fill-ins, which, as I actually understand it from previous conversations Mr. Gibb has made here and elsewhere, that the point of that recommendation was that that's not really an increased cost to us, it's a substitute cost. In other words, instead of using a substitute pool, we hire people with that money and just hire some full-times, subs, as it were, so that it's not sort of a new increased fund. It's just spending our substitute dollars in a different way. Is that accurate?
Well, a number of districts do use that strategy, but they do it when they do an analysis of what the call in substitutes is at their site on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, in my previous experience, we knew at the high school we had every day at least 5 or 6 teachers who were out. And the high school is probably not the best example because we usually try to secure substitutes who have credentials in that area. But let's say an elementary school.
I think we're going to go down a very long road here, and I'm going to try to do this quickly because I want to get to these priorities. The challenge with that is when you look at the cost of substitutes, if you look at the total cost, you're reflected on every day of the year, of which there's 183. It's like a hotel room, though. If you don't rent it, it's not there. People get sick in clusters, so we're going to need 5 substitutes in February and none in June. And so you need that pool. You can't have 2 people subbing in for all the days because the days won't add up. And so you'll end up increasing your costs significantly by having people sitting around, because we'll still need 5 or 6 subs, February 3rd when everybody has the flu. So it really is a challenge to do it that way.
That's absolutely correct.
But we did do that last year, didn't we? We had one person, and they ended up mostly filling in for a staff member who was out most of the year. But are we planning to do that again this year with that at least one person?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will tell you that because I've already heard about this issue from teachers in my meetings in the last couple of weeks and in the online survey that I have done, that I have made a note because I understand the point, and I thought Mr. Gibb made a good point. And I understand that the math works out, but I don't think it would work out because of the 5 absences in one day. We would still be in trouble. I'm not sure of the history and if we've tried in the past or not to, what would it be? I don't know the right word, but to have a partnership with another larger school district. So one of the items that I've made note of to myself is to contact both Oakland Unified and another school district that's neighboring us to find out if we cannot somehow work something out to where we can be part of their subsystem, because it is a very real issue that, well explained by Mr. Gibbon, that I've been hearing about. So those are some of the steps I'm going to take. And
To look at
yeah,
that,
so I
right.
thought I would let you know that.
You also triple your cost per day by having someone full-time, because a sub is $125 a day and a little extra for taxes and such. A full-time person's probably in the 300 to 400 range
But
per day.
we've been spending a lot of extra money on extra pay for teachers who take portions, because we don't get the subs. We split them to 3 teachers, and then we pay over, time or extra to our regular teachers, and that ends up costing us almost as much as if we had just hired a full-time pinch hitter. So I think I guess my point is, hopefully that we can address this issue. It does seem like a real issue. You're hearing about it, but it may be a fiscal management issue as opposed to something that belongs on this
Right.
list, or does it belong on this list?
But I think the topic, because staff should every year bring to you analysis of substitute costs and substitute needs. During my tenure here, we were in a kind of a sub-shortage situation, and it's an item unto itself, because you have to look at what we're paying substitutes on a daily rate versus what our districts we compete with are paying. The problem, and the main reason why districts go to a full-time sub is because they find themselves not having coverage. And so if you commit a person to be at school X every day, at least for one position, you can cover it. And it was particularly a strategy used in a period of time when there was really a shortage of subs. I don't think it's as much of an issue today. There are occasionally those days when if we have staff development and we need more subs than we normally do. But my understanding from Ms. Harrell is it's not quite the issue today as it was 4 or 5 years ago. But it's a topic that needs to be looked at irrespective of, and I don't think in most cases it's going to save you money, but what it does is at least ensures that you have one substitute there if you have 2 or 3 people out and you can't fill them all. So it just reduces the classes for which teachers don't have to cover during their prep. So
Okay.
I think that's a good topic for the staff to bring back to the board sometime in the fall, early fall.
Yeah, if we're not going to put it on this 20-odd list of priorities, then I would request, Dr. Rubio, that you bring it back early, like August, early September, especially after we know what our budget is, based on, as Dr. Sugiyama indicated, we might not be at 103,000 for our new hires, so we'll have a little better sense. Great, thanks.
Okay, if I could go down each item, and again, we'll take questions on any questions you have about how the amount was calculated. So item E, provide a full-time PE teacher in Anna Yates. We're estimating, just to be safe, that the cost for next year will be $103,727. And again, that assumes that whoever's hired in that position is able to come in at the highest step and column that our current teacher's contract allows for. So therefore, the full-time technology teacher is currently pegged at the same rate. Now, for those 2 positions, the funding sources that we identified are supplemental concentrated grant and also Title I. My understanding is the site council at Anna Yates has, I'm not sure approves the right word, but as indicated, a willingness to approve subsidizing part of that position from Title I funds. So I'm not sure exactly how much that is, $20,000
They only have 45
for each position, but it was just to illustrate that those are there are 2 funding sources.
So approximately 20 to 25,000 each? Is that your understanding, Ms. Hill? Yeah. Okay.
Then item C, the counselor to provide college guidance or administrative support is at the same estimated costs for next year, 103,000. The cluster of items under D, curriculum adoptions. Writing will be a major focus in the district, I understand, next year from a curriculum point of view. There is $20,000 being set aside from the Common Core implementation grant the district received last year to fund the adoption of writing in the district. And as a result of that, you will see in the far right-hand side there is a row, of X's there, which means that when you go through the prioritization exercise, you do not have to include that, or you do not have to assign it a priority, because the funding for that is already in place.
For that one, can Miss Allen, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If you have it, do you have the where we are in terms, like when the last adoption was for math and ELA? Because I don't remember.
The last math adoption was probably 4 years ago, I think, with everyday math in terms of maybe 4 or 5 years ago with everyday math. That's K through 6. With the middle school and the high school math, it's basically have items where curriculum has been purchased every year based on the course or class. So it wasn't like a full textbook adoption, but it may be a teacher who's offering a course like calculus or something, and the books were outdated, because with the specific classes, it's a lot less in terms of funding versus a whole curriculum adoption. However, ELA, a very long time ago, especially 6th through 8th grade. Open Court has been adopted originally, and then the second revision was adopted, and then last year foreign language was adopted. So, and I think social studies may have been about 5 or 6 years ago, K-6, but 6 through 12 social studies, it has been a very long time. Okay. So for the most part, in terms of Common Core, when we adopted last year's Spanish curriculum, the publisher themselves or the representative stated to wait about a couple years because no one is really ready. They slap Common Core on the books or in the teacher's edition, but when we've had our own teachers actually look through the curriculum, it's really repackaged. It's the same California state standards repackaged, but state's Common Core. So there's been some, so we have been talking to, in terms of our county, for some leadway in terms of adopting a full adoption. Other than that, I think what we have listed here is our pilots, but because what districts can do is pilot some curriculum before adopting a complete comprehensive.
And that pilot implementation, is that for K-12, or is that just for certain grade spans?
Mathematics K-8.
K-8, okay.
And then I think social studies, we're going to do social studies 10, 12.
Okay, thank you.
On item B, we had a part-time aid technology teacher this year, right, in the computer lab. So are we, I guess I thought we were upgrading that position to a full-time certified technology teacher.
Yes, my understanding, there has been this year an instructional aide that has been providing instruction under the supervision of a teacher. I think the proposal here is to replace the aide position with a full-time credentialed technology teacher.
That's my understanding, which I guess I'm wondering, should we get credit for should it not be 103,000, but should we subtract out the aide salary and benefits, because that's what we're adding is the upgrade, not 100 1.0 FTE. Thank you.
I would say, Board Member F, that that's correct, but as we understand what the proposal was coming from the Site Council, that cost for the IA technology position may be shifted to meet some other need. If that's not the case, then you are correct. The actual cost for the technology teacher would be potentially 103,000 minus the cost of the instructional aid for technology that's currently in the budget if that position were eliminated.
Yeah, I was at the meeting where the Site Council decided their final priorities, and my recollection is that they were apportioning 20,000 to what they thought was the current aide salary, because they thought that would get the bump up to a full-time credentialed person. So they weren't reallocating the aide salary, they were using that to enhance.
Okay, well, I wasn't involved in that discussion, so
Yeah.
I can't
So I'm just
respond to
saying,
that, but
yeah, maybe we can knock 50,000 or.
But then my question would be, is the IA a credentialed person working as an IA? They're not,
I,
so you can't do that.
no, you'd have to get a new person.
Right.
Actually, I thought Ms. B was a credentialed, but.
She's a credentialed teacher, but however, this position would be for a credentialed teacher.
right.
But the person who happens to be there was a long-term sub, and she happened to be credentialed.
The IA?
The substitute who's there now.
Okay,
Yeah, so I'm not talking about the person, I'm just talking about the position.
Okay,
And the
okay.
funding for it.
okay.
So that it might not be a full, 100,000 investment. I'm just trying to get us more money to
And that's right.
do more things.
That's why you're here. Okay. No, I was just trying to understand it. Okay. E, seems like. E or
So-
continue on D.
So this is, I think he's, did you have any more questions, Member Dice, about D? Okay. So E was to provide 2 more AP online courses and elective courses. So these courses are not just for students who are accelerated, because the elective courses are also for students who may possibly need it, but the students talked about just needing more elective courses. So this is, the $33,000 comes from a section. So if you have 2 sections, so this is cost out to how much each section would cost, and 2 sections will cost $33,000, based on the a staff member who has to supervise it or coordinate it, as well as the courses themselves.
So the students prefer online than actually going to the class itself, or having the teacher come to them, or them going to the community college?
Well, students would prefer to have elective courses on campus,
Okay.
because it's the most convenient would be to go to class on campus.
Right.
However, in lieu of the fact that we don't have the staffing, this is
Okay,
another
okay,
alternative
okay,
option.
So I'm gonna hit this one.
And not to revisit history all the time, but correct me if I'm wrong, we've had good success with online AP courses in the past. I mean, we've had a number of students participate in that program over the years, so it's not a new thing. It would just be expanding or increasing.
yes, and and the technology is used really very effectively, particularly in the schools in the rural areas of California, particularly up in the upper Sacramento Valley area and Northern California. So I'm sorry, but was the 33,000 was explained as two sections?
Yes.
Okay. Professional development on Common Core up to 6 days. So the range there, 12,250 to 27,000 per day for each of the 6 days. I need to explain that to you. In the contract with ETA, there is a provision in the contract that provides for the pay of teachers on an hourly rate. Calculated hourly rate of $35 if it doesn't involve contact with students, and $50 per hour if it does involve direct contact with students through, say, some instruction. Now, this is professional development, so it really would be based upon the $35 rate. However, you cannot require teachers to come, in this case, to professional development if the district were to offer $35 an hour. So the $12,250 per day assumes that you're paying every teacher to come at $35 an hour for a 7-hour professional development day. And so the cost per day, again, if every teacher came, even though you can't require it, at a cost of $35 an hour, the total would be $12,250 for a day. The $27,000 per day cost is based upon being able to negotiate with ETA added work days on their work year calendar. That is a matter that is under the collective bargaining laws, an item that the district would be obligated to negotiate. If if the negotiations, if there was agreement to add days to the teacher's work year, the 27,000, then they would be required to attend the professional development as a condition of their work year. And that cost based on the average per diem rate per teacher in our district, that cost would be $27,000 a day. So we felt, because we didn't know coming into this evening, since we didn't get direction on this as yet, we just wanted to give you the range of costs for a day under those two scenarios. If we go to the next page, for goal 2, A is purchase Chrome laptops with 30 devices each. Is actually Chrome laptop carts. It's a cart-based system, and each cart holds 30 Chromebooks. And the cost per cart with the 30 Chromebooks is about $9,500 per cart. Next item is purchase a student information assessment data system. This would be a system that would allow the district to store various types of student assessment data and be able to pull reports out that will assist with both program evaluation and formative assessment that will allow teachers to look at their classroom practice based on the data on the students. The estimated cost for that is $10,000. The next item is purchase college guidance, curriculum, technology, and materials, including college tours. This is, it doesn't say on here, but it really is focused on grades 6 through 12. And we're estimating the cost for that for next year is $5,000. The next item, D, is to provide work experience and/or internship experiences for students. And work experience, all of you probably know what internships are, because that's largely gotten most of the focus with CTE. But work experience education is a long-standing program in high schools in California. Essentially, students go out and seek a job 10 hours a week. They can get high school credit for it, but they have to participate at least once a week in an after-school program in which a teacher works with the students around a variety of things, such as workplace preparation, skills. The teacher would have to be the liaison with the field supervisors for the work experience that the student is engaged in. We're estimating a cost to pay for a stipend for this, because it's not a class that meets every day, so it wouldn't be a $16,000 section cost, but could well be a teacher who is willing to take this on as a stipend position at $5,000. Item E, the district is currently, or district teachers have in the past been trained in second step positive action and the Peacemaker curriculum. But unless, if there is a program that is a district initiative and you don't occasionally update the staff, we have a number of new teachers who probably did not have the training. So we're projecting or estimating a $5,000 cost to provide training in these 3 programs for the new staff that in the past had not been trained. In goal 3, provide parent workshops and training. It's essentially to provide a full range of parent education workshops and programs through the year to address a wide variety of topics, not just how to support your child's education or how to work with your child in reading or literacy, but also workshops, informational workshops for parents on LCAP, or workshops on parents related to college planning and the college application process. We're estimating the cost of that to be $2,500 next year. The next item that came from stakeholder groups is appropriate and equitable facilities for all organized sports. That is not an item that the board needs to prioritize, because the funding for that comes out of Measure J funds and is part of the budget for relocation costs that was planned when we knew that we would vacate the the old ESS site. On the next page, item C, operate a district school attendance review board and school attendance review teams at each school site. Those are currently in operation on a need-be basis. We put in a very small budget here. I kind of decided that we need to put something in there because there are material costs oftentimes, and it may be as simple as postage in terms of mailing letters. So we're saying basically a budget of $500 for each school site team and $500 for the district review team to fund the material and supply cost, but the people that serve on the school attendance review board and the site review teams are staff that are salaried staff, and so that's part of their assignment, or in many cases I guess they volunteer to serve on those committees. If you go then to section B of section 3B, and this is the section in which we identify what the funding priorities are for the three targeted groups in LCAP: the low-income pupils, English learners, and foster youth. And so here we have provide a full-time science teacher at $103,727. Now I want to, there is an interrelationship between this item and the item related to adding 2 more sections at the high school in either AP and or an elective class. Because the science teacher, this is a proposal to add a second science teacher at ESS. I think staff's thinking is we need to implement a 9th grade science program. Given the number of students we have in 9th grade, that would represent 2 sections of a science teacher's 5-period assignment. So if we were to hire a full-time science teacher, the proposal would be that that person would teach 2 sections of 9th grade science, but then would be available to teach 3 more periods if they're a full-time teacher, which means that they could teach an AP science class, could teach another elective, science elective. In actuality, although the proposal is to add 2 more sections, either AP or elective next year, there's the potential that a full-time science teacher not only could do the 9th grade science program, but teach 3 additional periods in science. So when you're prioritizing this, you can't look at the full-time science teacher as totally independent from the proposal on adding two classes at the secondary school, an AP and an elective, or 2 APs, or 2 electives, whatever the case may be. Is that one clear?
And this, are we gonna, we don't need this person at Annie Yates too? Even for
We
a
have
period
a
of day?
science, we have a science teacher at Annie Yates.
Yeah, which, and we have 8 grades at Annie Yates. And so it's just a question of whether that's some supplemental help.
I was just wondering if the high school teacher could then support, like, the 7th and 8th grade science teacher. They could do some collaboration work, if that could be worked into one
So
of
if
their
I could
periods possibly.
say a couple of things about, and I'll want me to do that in August or September once we have some of this sorted out, to give you the overall of the science program. But we have hired a new science resource teacher at Anna Yates. That teacher is fully covering K-5, K-1 with the teachers doing it in the classroom, 2 through 5 with them coming to science. 4 and 5 coming more than once a week. That teacher is also going to be fully supporting the 8th grade teacher, so that that 8th grade teacher can really become a math science core teacher. The middle school teachers are who do math science are math science core teachers. Now that grant that I told you about last week is ongoing professional development for the middle school teachers. We'll be meeting monthly. I'm going to be providing the support and two professors from Cal State East Bay that are going to focus on upgrading the middle school science. So, and what we need at the high school is we need to really make solid the high school program. So to get the core biology and chemistry, that we need to have a teacher for that, and then a second teacher to be able to teach ninth grade, and between whoever the two teachers are, figure out electives for juniors and seniors in particular. Does that help?
No.
And yeah, electives meaning an AP course is an elective course. And so it can be AP, it can be honors, it can be various kinds of challenging courses, get them ready for career types of things, really get them ready for UC. So I don't like to use AP per se, because that's just one brand, if you will, of an advanced or an honors class, but that type of class.
We've adopted a tech thrust. Is the science position, I guess I think a science teacher could do some
Absolutely.
tech work?
In fact,
Would you say automatically should be able to, or do we need to look for the particular skills
I've
within
actually
it?
identified some people,
Okay.
because we've been doing a lot of interviewing for the position that we did have, and in the course of that, we found some people, and it's a question of having a position authorized. But we've identified people who have science and strong computer background, including work in the industry, as well as either credentials in math or strong. And so that's one of the things when I mentioned that C-STEM thing that Mr. Burns and I are going to, that's also to lay the foundation to be able to do, for example, an integrated course that would be computer science and math and science, for example. But we can't design those until we have the teachers to do it.
Right.
So I would be, just from my own experience, I would rather see us hire the science teachers at the high school to be at the high school. Talk to Ms. Stillman about what it was like to split herself between the two schools. Or remember back to our music teachers splitting between the two schools.
Right.
Back when I was doing work at both schools, it's really difficult.
I guess just, we've adopted a tech thrust. I think this is a very important priority for me. I would not feel comfortable, I guess, prioritizing it unless I knew that this position would be able to teach tech in the way that you're talking about, so that we can implement our tech thrust.
If it's
So I guess-
authorized, we have been
That's
able
what
to
she's looking
identify
for,
people
right.
to do it. We
You
can
know-
make that the priority.
You know, Carol, I mean, I like that she kind of set the plan out, because my concern hiring a ninth grade science teacher was that our 7th and 8th graders wouldn't come in prepared. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that, first of all, the work you'll be doing in the summertime,
And through the whole
right, and through all, actually, right, you're right, all through next year, 14, 15 year, it will be training middle grade teachers, to teach and support, the science curriculum for the middle school.
Yeah, that's-
Therefore, they will be prepared when they get in the ninth grade.
Yeah, that's fully being.
Because what I wouldn't want to do is send students into a ninth grade science class unprepared and set them up for failure. You know what I mean? I mean, not being prepared.
Yeah, the whole idea is that everybody will be working in articulation. But
Right.
the reason I went after, when we had the opportunity
Okay.
to get some of that that STEM money through Cal State East Bay,
Okay.
we deliberately focused middle school for that reason.
Well, you have me a lot more comfortable by saying
Okay.
that.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next item? Yep. The next item is provide a stipend or a bonus pay to staff for data analysis evaluation. This really is intended to fund the staff time needed after school for teachers to work with each other to look at student data, formative assessment data, to evaluate quality of student work collaboratively, and then it's kind of like the concept of forming data teams, and for the district to become more data-driven in its focus on program improvement and instructional improvement. So we're estimating $10,000 there for next year.
Just interrupt, just applaud that recommendation. I think, and I'm not trying to provide commentary at each item, nor am I trying to, ask the board to do that. I'm sorry, but I just had to, just to value that that suggestion. I think that was really powerful. In order to be go in that direction, it seems like to be more transparent and bring more people into the discussion makes a whole lot of sense. So I just wanted to appreciate staff for bringing that one. Thank you.
The next item is provide education specialists access to general education for intervention services through response instruction intervention. So I just need to explain this a little bit. At Annie Yates, we have 4 special education teachers that have created a learning center concept. And it's a combination of pull out and push in strategies. But the fact is that 3.6 full-time equivalents of the 4 full-time teachers is funded with special ed funds, which by law then prohibits them from working with students who do not have IEPs. So consequently, my understanding is in the current year, and I don't know if this existed, this was the case last year, but in the current year, 40% of one of the teachers is being funded by Title I. About $40,000 of Title I money is paying for 40% of the one teacher's salary. As a result, that teacher is able to provide services to targeted students, but who may not necessarily be eligible for special ed. Partly because the site council has made a commitment to fund a portion of the PE teacher and the technology teacher, $240,000. Those dollars then would not be available for the ability of the special ed teachers to service non-special ed students. So the proposal here is to fund 20% of each of the 4 teachers with supplemental concentrated grant funds, which would then legally allow them to provide services to non-special ed but targeted students who are not meeting standard. The actual cost for that, based on the 4 incumbents in those positions, would be about $68,000.
I might just add that there has been some communication between us and the state about getting this issue correctly aligned, just so you're aware of that. This particular issue, yeah. And it is on, it is one of the items I would recommend if you want to know those items later.
Item D, supplemental reading materials for acceleration, intervention, and for English learners and students with special needs. $15,000 is the estimated expenditure proposal for next year. Item E, provide hourly pay to staff for after-school tutoring and test prep for intervention in grades 6 through 8. So the $18,000 would cover the cost of 3 teachers, one to focus on 6th grade and one to focus on with 7th grade students, and the third to focus with 8th grade students. And that dollar amount is calculated on the basis of the hourly rate. And as I mentioned in the teacher's contract, the hourly rate for direct instruction with students is $50 an hour. So it's based on $50 an hour times 4 hours a week. That is an hour after school every day for 4 days a week, times 30 weeks. There are actually 36 depending on how the calendar falls, it's usually 35 or 36 weeks of school during the school year. So there's usually a period of a couple of weeks when you need to identify students, and then usually tutoring programs wrap up 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the school year. So we just kind of estimated it's a 30-week program, an hour every day, 4 days a week at a cost of $50. So it's about $6,000 per teacher. Total cost for the 3 grade levels is $18,000. Item F, provide a part-time family resource coordinator. As the board knows, we've established a family resource center. The officers are coexisting on the city's community and recreation department site, and that position currently has been funded through grants that are all due to expire at the end of this year. Ms. Dunn is very active in looking at submitting and has submitted some other grant proposals and has been talking with other partners. Of course, we as of yet do not know how that's going to work out, but the estimated cost for that would be $25,000. This is a good example of another item that if the board decided it was a high priority and you wanted to fund it so we'd move forward with this, if grants subsequently came through that could be used for this purpose, then that would free up a supplemental grant that could then be used for other priorities. There's just a few more items on the next page. Yes.
For the parcel tax, I'm just curious, is it because we've probably tapped our where we're going with the parcel tax next year, and that's why it's not captured under there? Okay, I saw a nodding head. Thank you.
Is that right?
In terms of what's budgeted?
Well, there is money that will carry forward to next year's parcel tax revenues that fund wellness, but those dollars are pretty well committed and is currently not funding actually the Family Resource Center coordinator.
Right, because there's been funding identified through Mrs. Dunn's efforts, so makes sense.
But I will say this, since I won't be here, I think it's really, no, I'm saying this only because I'm thinking about it, and if I don't say it, I'll forget. I'm sure Dr. Rubin and I will have a chance to talk about this over the next week or so, but it's always a good idea to re-examine parcel tax expenditures. The board's aware that the measure passed with specific areas for which the tax would be used. But obviously, district priorities change, and I don't mean in terms of the categories that were on the measure, but in terms of how those dollars are spent. So it would not be a bad idea for the board in a study session with staff sometime in the fall to take a look at the current proposed expenditures or the current expenditures of parcel tax, just to make sure the board, we provide that data to the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, and we go in detail with what categories and what we're spending it for. I'm not sure that the board necessarily has had that kind of presentation, so it probably would be good in the fall for the board to have that.
You're in my head.
And we should keep it, in the same format that I believe you all created about a week or so ago.
Yeah, so actually Appendix B, and I don't want you to, we're not going to spend time on the appendix, but Appendix B was an effort to take all of the parcel tax dollars we currently receive, look at what services are being provided and align them to the state priorities. So, and that was really intended only as a resource document for the board so that you can see how the parcel tax dollars are spent. And I believe almost all the dollars are represented on that chart.
Thank you.
Okay, then the last 3 items, and then we'll take just any general questions before we go through this exercise, is provide a part-time ELL teacher. This is at ESS. There is currently no English language learner teacher at ESS. And although we have not a large population of EL students at the high school level, there are students there and who could require service, and the 41,000 represents 2 periods a day for those students who need that support. And then the last 2 items, F, near the bottom says provide a Spanish-speaking bilingual parent liaison. $30,000 is the estimate. In those districts or schools that do have this type of position, they're almost always classified positions. They are not management positions. Therefore, the appropriate rate of pay generally would be about $30,000 a year. And then lastly, provide translation services in Spanish. There are people that are currently available on staff, part-time classified people who have been providing this service, and they are paid on a time card for that service. And we're proposing a budget of $5,000 to be able to continue that service as needed. The rest of the items are for the three targeted groups. All have been addressed either in the section on low-income students or English learners, and so rather than duplicate it, they're not in bold, and the priority rank column is lined out, I guess, with asterisks, so that the board would not prioritize those twice. So by my count, there's 22 items on the list. Please remember that in a couple of instances, there's an interrelationship between the items. The science teacher could well handle or address the other item related to adding 2 AP and or elective classes at the secondary school. So if you were to, for example, assign both of those as a number one priority, we would not proceed with that with the assumption it's going to cost $103,000 plus another cost for 2 more sections. It would be subsumed under the one item for a science teacher.
And before we begin the process, I don't know if the board would like to know my recommendations or priorities, but I'd be very glad to share those with you before you begin. Is that okay? From my overall look, and I've heard from 96% of all of our teachers in the last week and a half in response to about 20 or so questions online regarding Common Core, their level of awareness, what they think we need to do next. And then looking over the information provided by Mr. Gibb and the input that Ms. Allen has given us all in this process as well. The 4 things I would recommend as the incoming superintendent to you to highly consider, or I'd strongly encourage you to consider, and this is from staff as well as myself tonight. The number 1 item would be the ESS science teacher position, because we cannot provide 9th graders and other students as well the science courses that we really need to provide, as well as some elective options. And if you have more questions about that, I'm sure Ms. Balfe will be very glad to respond. So that is the number 1 priority right now that I would recommend. The second item, and that's on page 3.
Is this in order of your preferences?
This would be in order. I guess it would be in order, yeah. It's a pretty tight order, but yes. The next item would be item C that I mentioned regarding the communication between our district and the and special ed and the CDE in terms of in the Learning Center model, in terms of making sure we can legally have our teachers seeing other students and not just special ed students, and make sure we have a functioning Learning Center model. It is therefore my second recommendation that we strongly look at item C on page 3 for $68,062. My third and fourth, and that's about as far as I can go financially, recommendations would be the math adoption, particularly because the general sense I get from staff is that they feel that we really have to move quickly and do some catching up on Common Core. We have 15 teachers at Anna Yates who have committed to move forward and pilot materials, specific math materials regarding math. And so I would that is an item on page 1 that we identified for approximately $30,000. that would include also some supplemental materials as well that they may not have in this new type of adoption. And it is the only math curriculum that I've particularly identified in Berkeley is using it. I'm aware, I believe, that has received certification in a seems to be a very in-depth review by the Louisiana State Department of Education as being fully aligned so far in math. No other publisher out of about 10 or 15 publishers have been able to achieve that. And I'm familiar with it coming in from my last district, just full disclosure in terms of the process we went through looking across the country. And then the last and final would be still regarding the Common Core, and that is that we really need, and it is item on page 1, I think is it the last item? It's item F, that we really, in my conversation so far with teachers, and I've expressed that we really need to look at our calendar and look at how we need to look at some different ways of being able to do professional development so that we can, there's no way for any school district to accomplish the amount of learning that we need to do right now with new Common Core content material on math, language arts, new ELD standards, new science standards, all of that, and I'm probably forgetting something. So without really doing something different, it is not really going to be able to be effectively accomplished through collaboration time or after school meetings. And we also have a substitute problem. So as soon as I started talking about it, teachers were very quick to let me know I will not be able to get more than 3 or 4 of them together, and even then I'll be lucky to have substitute coverage. So without doing something very different and having full days of professional development on the calendar for at least a year, we will not be able to do this. And one teacher comment I thought was really pretty good. They said, and I did promise teachers I wouldn't identify who said this, and I don't even know offhand, but they said if I had to label our needs regarding Common Core, the label would read Emergency 911. And so I would kind of agree with that in terms of where, how I would like to help as superintendent move us a little bit quicker along this path. And so I'm already past the amount of money now at this point that we have available. So, but those are my recommendations. The ESS science teacher and the multiple days, the days of professional development and that kind of time are also both in the, are 2 of the items in the information Mr. Gibbs shared with me. I think he had identified, one of his items had identified about a targeted professional development for $150,000. And that was just one of the items, but I did want to indicate the overlap of 2 of these items with Mr. Gibbs' information to me. So those will be my strong recommendations for you to consider as you do your ranking tonight.
Can I ask a question regarding the curriculum adoption? Now, is the $30,000 just for the math and the $20,000 just for the writing or English? Or, how does the funding or the estimate cost play out as far as what we can actually do with these 2, 4, 5 priorities?
Well, the $20,000 for writing is covered already. You'll notice the excess to the right in the Common Core Implementation Grant.
Okay,
but does that help? I'm not sure.
No,
That.
yep,
Okay.
Yep. You got it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
With little variance, I went through this and ranked mine as well, and we were pretty well aligned. So I want to just give you that feedback that I appreciate what you did. I had the science teacher ranked high. I had the special ed ranked very high, and I think we're really on the same page here. So thank you.
Before we go into ranking, I did have some, I guess, overarching comments and thoughts on this presentation, which was very helpful. And I guess we already dealt with some of the number issues, but so the estimated cost on A and B, I think are less than 103 because we ought to count the 20,000 or so that the Title I is going towards that, and in B we ought to count the what we're paying out for the aid. On the math the math adoption and the special ed, I agree those are both priorities, and that I think we got to do them now. However, I think those are base grant, parcel tax, core dollars, which, you know, I mean, I know they're used up, but I don't think those are supplemental concentration. I think that should be part of our core program funding. So and we ought to figure out, you know, how and when and if to do that, and that's a reason why really we should have been having this conversation about a month ago, so that we had the time to kind of think about that with our documentation. I had on the professional development, I guess I'd know that we have the Common Core implementation grant. Do we have none of that money? I mean, we did set aside a third or so of it for Common Core professional development. Have we assigned that already, and we don't have any for that? So that's one. Let me just go through a few more items. And the yeah, the family resource person, it's important, but I guess I'm just really hopeful we're going to get the San Francisco Foundation grant. We got really good signs from the program officer when we all met with her a month or so ago, that they wanted to support that. That's more commentary. And I guess the last comment was on the Spanish-speaking bilingual parent liaison. In my mind, it's exactly as Mr. Gibb described it, as I've heard it. It's not just for this Latino or Spanish-speaking community. It is to engage the whole parent community, improve and for which we need that person to be bilingual, at least in Spanish. So that's comment. And I don't know if 30,000 is enough for that. And it might be, you know, maybe it's not a professional management position, but it might be that we need to attract someone for a little more than that.
Right, and I might just add to what I said, because I realized I didn't say it. Just there are so many things on this list that are important, and I think, you know, I appreciate the input from the community and the teachers. So I certainly hope my recommendations don't negate the importance of those things, and I wouldn't disagree with you about your last comment that we may need to look at more money in that recommendation for that parent liaison, bilingual parent liaison position, and that might be a good one to earmark as a top priority going into year 2. Of the 4 recommendations I've made so far, I'm at $290,000 to $350,000. So there is some Common Core money implementation left. I believe it's $40,000 left. So, you know, I'm making this recommendation knowing that it doesn't all fit already, and so.
Sorry, say that again. It's how much?
What I'm at now, or what's in Common Core?
Common Core money.
I believe it's $40,000 remaining in professional development.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
No, although I respect Member Atfield's comments, to the extent of, from my understanding, the supplemental and concentration dollars are for is to actually enhance, you know, those students in this under these demographics, low income and EL, and help support, you know, those students to become proficient and get them, you know, above or at and below and above grade level. So, I mean, to your point, as far as some of these, as far as, you know, yeah, we can, if we had the money, support them with, you know, base dollars, but I wouldn't say that they are not under the category and could not be funded with the supplemental and concentration dollars, especially the RTI. And actually the science teacher as well, because what we want to do, we want to get students to a certain point, you know, if we're going to be quote unquote STEM, you know, with a right, and with the thrust of technology, I mean, we need if we're going to be that, we need to have those teachers here for that, and we don't have that, and we can afford it with the base that we have. So, you know, I think it's just we have to kind of pick what's the most important based on what direction the district wants to go into. So, or you know, go forward.
Let me be a little clearer. You're correct. Given our concentration of unduplicated pupils being over 55%, we can, in fact, really doesn't matter on your concentration. Your showing needs to be, you know, greater the lower your but you could have 10% concentration and spend your money on a district-wide program. So we clearly can do that, and at our concentration level, you know, I agree with you. We don't have a second high school science teacher. I think it's an appropriate use to add that service with our supplemental concentration dollars because we couldn't get it any other way. And it meets the regulatory definition as long as we describe in our LCAP how that service serves unduplicated pupils goals in our LCAP, which we should be able to do. So that's, I was pulled out two in particular that I think should be considered part of our core program that is base dollar funding and not invade our supplemental concentration. And those two are, number one, our basic Common Core curriculum adoption materials, like that's,
no, I agree with that.
We just got to do that for kids.
I agree.
That's not a supplemental
Right.
thing.
I agree.
And special ed, I think anything on special ed we need to do,
Right.
and we are under federal obligation to do.
Right.
And we got to find a way to do that with our core dollars and not our supplemental concentration.
Sounds like
couple-
prioritization.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments in response to the board's discussion. I would say there's still, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this between now and Wednesday, but there's still some areas that staff needs to think about. I think the board should still go through the prioritization exercise. And let me just, as a way of example, not to influence you, although Dr. Rubin and I have talked, and I totally support the areas he's identified, not just based on the conversations we have, but based upon what I've observed when I was here 3 years ago. But, for example, professional development, which is really critical, particularly in terms of where we are today. The district does receive other sources of funding that could be used for professional development. What happens in a lot of districts is they get, whether it's Title III money or, you know, other sources of funding, say from the base grant that is set aside for professional development, which usually is enough. But if you combine all the sources of dollars that may be available for professional development, one of the things that's very clear is that districts never have enough resources to be able to do all the professional development they want. So in most places I've been, there is a annual plan for professional development. And you look at all the sources of funding and you say, what are your priorities for professional development this year? And you ensure that every dollar available to you for PD is only spent on those priorities. Not on a bunch of other stuff that'd be nice to do, nice to have, and all that, but because you don't have unlimited dollars, you take every dollar that could be identified for PD and you focus on the identified priorities. So my point is, we haven't really had a chance to go through that exercise, at least since I've been here, and Dr. Rubio has been here fewer days than I have. But I think that the staff will try to go back and look at, okay, so where is there dollars in the core, in the base grant that has been used for PD, and how can that be used to meet, let's say, that priority so that there isn't as much of the supplemental and concentrated grant being used. Same goes for instructional materials, for the adoption costs. And, you know, and then there's the whole issue that, you know, we use the base grant, for example, if there is insufficient materials for students in a particular grade level, for a particular subject, because we're required to make sure that all students have sufficiency of instructional materials. So I know that every year we're ordering additional books to fill in the gaps for books that have been lost, damaged, otherwise no longer able to be used in order to meet the Williams requirements. So, you know, we need to look at all those sources in the base grant that are paying for many of these things. But that really is going to require from my point of view, a line-by-line analysis of the current general fund dollars to really see how those dollars are spent. And in the ideal world, that would have been the process that would answer some of the questions the board members have tonight. It's not something that can't be done during the summer or early fall, and then the board can make, as the process allows, revisions to the LCAP plan to realign where the dollars are spent. But we just, you know, given the staff and I've shared with the board when I was here before, there is more to be done in this district than you have staff to do it. And so consequently, with all due respect to Mr. Gibbs' comments, if things tend to be on the later side than earlier, it's because staff is juggling multiple projects at the same time, trying to meet a variety of stakeholder expectations. And I could say this because I don't have vested interest in this, because June 30th, you know, it was nice to help you guys. So I'm the best person to say this. I'm going to tell you that the demands on the existing staff you have are not realistic. They don't have the bandwidth, and I'm not into excuses. Okay, this is not an excuse. To use Mr. Gibbs' words, it's the reality. It's the facts. You don't have the staff that has the bandwidth, and you're getting too used to people coming in every Saturday on their own time to put in work. We know that this last year's senior class had a very high percentage of students who got into four-year college university, and that's because Ms. Allen and some other staff came in on Saturdays, I don't know, three Saturdays a month, and worked with individual students to help them go through the process. I don't know if the board knew that or knows that. Yeah. So it's important for a district to have high expectations, but you have to think about the bandwidth your staff has, because you're going to burn people out. And when I say you, please don't take, I'm not saying board, but we're a small district, but we have to meet the same requirements that every other district does. Exactly. When I came, and I didn't come from a huge district my last job, Dublin had 5,000 kids. But we had 4 times more staff, and so when things came down the road, we had more flexibility for people to kind of drop this and work on other things. Everything we do here seems to have the same level of urgency and importance, and you don't have the horses to pull the wagon. So I just want the board at least to be sensitive to that as you move forward. I think that the effort that was put in on this, I think Ms. Allen was having to do it all by herself, basically. There's no other staff to help her with this. And so, you know, there's been a lot of time put into this. There's been a lot of activity put into this in the last 2 months. And we think for that this basically is a very good plan. I want to thank Board Member Affel for his comments, because I think the comments that he submitted in response to this are very good suggestions. Many of those things we can actually take care of in the revision Monday morning. We blocked out our schedule Monday morning to make some of the things that you had suggested that we can actually correct. I think the one thing we can't do realistically between on a Wednesday is to tell the whole story. We had a goal to try to capture everything that the base grant is doing, basically everything the district is doing, and to capture that in this plan. I personally think that's a good idea. The county said, well, we're not requiring that. That's, you know, we don't know. Next year it may be required, but we're not requiring that. But I think for the benefit of the community and the stakeholders in the community, I think it's a good idea. And it's good for us, because then we'll know where every dollar is spent. We should know that more than anybody. But it's not something we can do and get the plan to the county in time for the June 30th deadline. But it's certainly something that I think the staff will look at as we move forward through the summer into the early fall. So I'm sorry that I took longer than I did, but I think that because this is so important, I want to make sure the board understood why maybe it wasn't perfect. There are some gaps. We can certainly have done some things better. But I think given the reality of where we are with the staff and the time we have, we think that this is our best effort. We think it meets the requirements that the county has expressed to us. And we just need board direction on what it is you want to fund for next year so that we can build that and make the revisions to the general fund budget that you will be presented next Wednesday. With all of us understanding that the process does allow for revisions and either new sources of funding are identified, or we have greater carryover than we anticipated, or we actually realign base grant dollars, for example, like on the professional development piece, so that we can come back to you maybe in August and say, you know what, we can redirect 20,000 of parcel tax money to handle PD in this area. So we're reducing that liability, if you will, to the supplemental grant. So board, let's have a meeting, let's talk about the other things that you would like to fund with that extra money. We're hoping that that will be where we'll be able to be sometime in the early fall.
And I'll just add very quickly, I will be going line by line through the budget. I haven't been able to complete that yet, but that will be something I'm doing in the beginning of July, because I want to know how every single staff member is funded, where those funds are coming from, so I can try to figure out how is it possible that we have we're running a budget deficit that I think is actually approaching 500,000 a year. And so I need to understand that, and so I'll be going through that to your comments to understand why is it that I'm having to actually prioritize that in this budget, and I can't right now be able to do that elsewhere, so as far as I know.
So as I ask you to go through this exercise, I'm going to tell you how to do it. I want you to also, though, make sure you have the mindset that this is not about what we're wanting to fund and what we're not wanting to fund. It's about probably you want to fund all of it, if you could. But it's for the dollars you have available now, what are the things that are most important for you to fund for next year? With the caveat that there may be other monies identified, there could be monies redirected to meet some of these priorities, but for the purposes of board approval of the general fund budget next week and the approval of the LCAP plan, we think the board needs to do this exercise tonight. So the way that we've designed this is we want you individually to take this sheet and put down your priority next to each item. And the priority that you're going to assign to each item is number 1 means high priority, 2 means medium priority, and 3 means low priority. And of course, that's relative. I don't mean to say that low priority means you don't think it's important, but relative to the other items. And so you put a 1, 2, or 3 next to each item. There's only 22 items or so it shouldn't take you too long. When each board member is completed with that, then we're going to take an average score from the 5 of you, and we're going to write that score up next to the items up on the chart there. And that way then the board will be able to see how much consensus there is among the board around some of the items, and you know, conversely, how much divergence there is among the board members on some of the items. And hopefully this exercise will at least identify the top items, and then the board, I would suggest the board have a conversation about the relative merits of those items, particularly if they end up costing more than $241,000.
Can I ask a quick question for item C on the first page under goal 1? That's addition, or is that to maintain our counselor? Okay. Okay.
Is that for, and I had the same question, is that for ESS or is that for this, or is that district-wide?
It's either or. So some people, so staff has, Julie had it.
Microphone.
It's both. It could go either way. So there's been comments about the counselor being a 6th through 12th grade, like adding another one, but there's also been one using the counselor more as an administrative person, because you have high demands on 2 principals without any admin support.
Okay, thank you.
So that's a vice principal
I would
almost?
say like a dean kind of role?
Basically, so basically what a counselor has what you call a PPS credential, and they can do administrative duties up to a vice principal.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, so
Let's do it. Let's get it
unless
done.
there are other questions, if the let's do this as let's just say this is the first pass through on an effort to prioritize. If we have some problems with it, we can regroup, and
Okay.
I've got other ways in which we can do this, but let's try it this way.
Okay,
For
he's got a way, okay.
Bless you.
but the most you only have a 40%
Yeah, I got all
position,
that.
right?
So I'm just saying, if
So-
if I go with the science teacher, have I covered the two more AP?
One AP and one elective perhaps, or two AP, no new additional
Yeah.
electives, or
So-
perhaps two electives. The electives would be academic electives, or not, it would be electives in the core area,
I'm
not,
just saying, is that the same item effectively?
it can be, right.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. It is in my mind. So I don't want to rank the AP one at all. For me, I don't want to confuse people.
Well,
but
I would say that
because I wanna do
if the science was a high priority, you'd probably be wasting a vote if you then also rank the AP/elective item.
That's helpful.
For the full-time tech teacher, is this NEH or ESS? Tech teacher. NEH, okay.
Okay? And we're just going to go down from the top, from the first page. So the first one is to provide a full-time PE teacher at Anna Yates. I need to know your scores.
3.
1?
3.
3.
3.
1.
3.
3.
That is 13
I'm glad he's mad.
divided by 5 is 2.6. So, okay, it's there. All right, provide a full-time technology teacher.
2.
2.
1.
2.
3.
That is 2.0. Okay, the next item is counsel to provide college guidance or administration support.
2.
2.
2.
2.
3.
That's 2.2. Next item is, now the writing is covered, so it's actually the mathematics pilot implementation.
1.
2.
Unrated. 0.
Okay?
1.
3. I'm sorry, 1. Sorry. I'm
All right,
still
can we,
focusing
can
on
we
the
do that
0.
over again?
Yeah.
Maybe it should be a 4.
Yeah. If you give it a 0, that's a really
1.
good score.
I know, you're right. 10.
It's-
That's funny.
yeah.
Okay.
President Dice?
We're doing it
I'm
again.
sorry, 2.
No, same thing. Same item.
2.
Right.
Mine- it's-
0.
I'm on it.
Okay.
Well, I guess I have to give it a 4.
You're going to scoot. You're going to
This is, the numbers are inverse, right? I mean, that's the problem. So your 2.0 is better than 2.6.
That's correct.
Right, yeah. So that's why I give it a 4.
So that's a 3.
You're right.
So we have 1, 2, 3,
1.
One.
One.
One. One point six.
Yeah, I have an objection to, you've heard my objection.
Objection
So-
sustained.
Thank you. That means you accepted my.
I was going to say, you should have said noted.
Opposed to overrule.
Should have been noted.
Okay, provide,
You're abstaining as a
Zero,
motion,
that's
it's
why
the
I'm
same
not
as a
law.
zero.
item E, provide 2 more AP and or elective classes.
Now, see, I didn't vote on that one because of the science
Pick a
teacher.
number.
Yeah. same.
So then it's a 3?
Okay. Well,
One.
well, okay, all right, okay. One.
Wait.
He flipped it. He went to one.
Well, because,
But, no, see, Dr. Sugiyama is giving conflicting instructions here.
No.
We could rate it as 3, I mean, it should just be combined with the high school science thing, I think, just to
That's
eliminate
how I
the
treated it.
confusion.
That's how I
Just
treated it.
assume that they're basically
I treated
both
it that way.
tied together.
okay, if
That's
that's,
how I
okay,
worked it.
okay. if
I'll-
that's the case-
Programmatically, Dr. Balfour, will that work?
Okay,
All right, then let's pass on that item then,
Okay,
and
that's
assume that it is, by the board's intention, part of the full-time science teacher
Yeah, plus AP next
item.
time. Okay.
Okay, then the next item is purchase Chrome laptops with 30,
You skip professional development.
oh, I'm sorry, professional development? Remember, Dwayne?
yeah, so I have,
No documentary.
I mean, are we gonna come back with the dollars in Common Core with this
You
item?
just have to assume that.
I think we're going to have to come back on a couple things because we don't, even the items such as a teacher's salary or I'll be
Okay,
coming back
okay, all right, all right.
regardless.
Okay, one.
I put two.
One.
One.
2.
I feel the pressure.
That's 1.4. Okay, the next item is Chromebooks. Purchase
Mhm.
carts with Chromebooks at 9,500 each.
One.
3.
2.
Two.
2. For an average of 2.
That is 2.0. Purchase student information assessment data system.
Two.
1.
2.
Two.
1.
Eight divided by
it's
five.
a two.
Somebody counted it up. 8 divided by 5.
1.6.
I'm sorry. We're on
Purchase college guidance curriculum.
item C, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, item C, purchase college guidance curriculum, technology, and materials.
Two.
1.
2.
Two.
2.
1.8, okay. Item D, provide work experience and/or internship experiences for students.
One.
1.
3.
Two.
1.
1.6. Item E, to engage in second step positive action and peacemaker curriculum.
Three.
1.
2.
Three.
3.
2.4, okay. Item A, provide parent workshops and training.
One.
3.
1.
Three.
3.
2.2, item B, provide appropriate and equitable facilities for all organized, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, no, I'm sorry. That one's funded. Item C, operate a district school attendance review board and school attendance review team at each school site.
That's,
Hold on.
isn't that funded
You got
Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second.
out of the base grant?
My phone is out. Anna, can I use can we use your phone? Or do you have another calculator?
No light? Is the
Oh,
light?
I did that one. We didn't have to do that.
I didn't do that, wow.
I didn't do it.
Do we
It
have to
doesn't-
do?
there's
Can
no
we
X's
just
next to it, but
Keep
it says
going because we
base
can
grant.
do the math pretty.
Oh, okay.
We've
So
got a pattern established.
somebody
So
ready?
were we supposed to do, I didn't do C at
I
the
didn't
top
do
of this.
C.
Thank you.
page.
Okay,
It
item
says
C,
base
somebody's
grant.
doing who's doing the math?
No.
Do we have to do C?
Do we have to do C at all? Shouldn't there be
Priority
X's
ranking.
there? It says it's funded out of the base grant.
Oh, My apology.
Makes sense.
Base grant.
Okay.
Is that
Okay, I
correct?
had a 3 anyway.
I had it at 1.
Very-
Well, no, it's $1,500 actually.
Out of the base grant. It says base grant.
That's an error on our part.
Oh, okay.
So the error is not the lack of X's.
Oh, we have it covered. So skip it. Okay.
Okay.
We got it covered.
Okay,
All right,
sorry.
good.
It was
Section
number
B,
14.
item A.
It's like-
And how are we doing the math, though? Okay, I'll wait till you get there. Providing a full-time science teacher,
1.
1.
1,
1.
2.
5. 1.2.
Yeah.
Good.
You have it
do
for,
it.
you want to handle the math,
There.
please?
She's a mad person anyway.
Okay. Item B, provide a stipend or bonus pay to staff for data analysis and evaluation.
3.
1.
2,
2.
2. It's an average of 2.
2.0. Item C, provide education specialists access to general education for intervention services through response to instruction and intervention.
1.
1.
objection 10.
3. He gave it a 3. That's a 3.
I did.
Okay, 1.
You can count it how you want.
I'm going to give it a 0 to counter his 10.
That is so funny.
1.
Y'all are killing me.
So is that a total of 7? 7 divided by 5? 1.4.
Okay, she got it.
Item D, supplemental reading materials for acceleration and intervention English learners and students with special needs.
2.
1.
2,
1.
1.
7 divided by 5.
1.2.
1.2. Thank you. Item E, provide hourly pay to staff for after-school tutoring and test prep.
Excuse me, hold on. The last one, 7 divided by 5 is 1.4.
She's like, you caught me. She's like, you caught me. Okay.
Okay.
Don't make me nervous, Dora. I'm depending on you for numbers. Okay. Provide hourly pay. Is that where we're at, item E?
Yeah.
For staff for after-school tutoring and test prep for intervention.
1.
2.
3,
1.
1. 1.6.
1.6. Provide a part-time family resource coordinator.
2.
2.
2,
2.
3.
2.2. For English language learners, provide a part-time ELL teacher.
1.
1.
2,
2.
2.
1.6. Provide a full-time teacher and 2 instructional aides for English language development.
Oh.
No,
It's already
skip on to
budgeted.
F.
Just the bold ones.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Item F, provide a Spanish-speaking bilingual parent liaison.
3.
1.
2,
2.
3.
11.
2.2.
2.2.
Y'all are messing
Item G, provide translation services in Spanish.
3.
1.
that is something we're already doing, right? As I think you explained.
We are.
So,
Oh, I missed that.
yeah, so I'm not gonna vote for that one also. It's not an increase or improvement.
We do that already?
Because 3 is going to get all knocked down anyway.
Yeah.
Who's going to confer?
It may be that, maybe we're not paying, but, I mean, it's not a new increased service.
Makes sense.
So either we pay
So
for it
it'd
out
be
of
a 3.
base or,
All right, you don't have to write that one.
okay,
We'll continue with base grant money.
okay.
That was the last
Yeah,
one.
the general fund, the base grant is covering the current year costs for that, and we'll just roll that amount over to next year.
Okay.
So, Mr. Advil.
That was the last one.
I mean, we should be doing it.
So, Ms. Allen, as you look at the list there, so the highest priority items have the lowest number, and the lowest number you can have is 1. So, Are there any items where all 5 board members gave a value 1 so that the score is 1.0?
No.
Okay, how about 1.2?
We have a couple.
Do you mind circling those with maybe blue pen? Oh, okay. Anything else with 1.2? Okay. How about 1.4?
Can you circle?
Okay. If you can circle those.
Thank you, Vanna.
Just a process question, Dr. Sugiyama. At this point, since we've gone beyond the budget, do we want to change colors as we think about the next year?
That would be a good idea. So we covered 1.4. How about 1.6?
It's kind of hard to see that one.
And the student position.
I was feeling bad about having to go last on everything. I'm feeling good because I can see it no problem from here.
That color, I know, Ms. Allen, I do appreciate your circling, don't get me wrong. But can we recircle those in a darker color? Because I think it's hard for the board members to see, is that
Can
correct?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I think at this point, we've greatly exceeded the budget, and so maybe what we could do is give you guys a chance to reorganize with the priorities, sort of the 1.2, the 1.4, the 1.6 on a single page while we go into closed session.
Well, I think what we can do is to assume that we're going to build the 1.2s in the plan and in the budget, but what possibly we can do on Monday is we can see if some of the other items might be able to be covered through redirection of base grant money.
Okay.
But they'll still be part of the plan because the county is saying, you know, if you're going to address a state priority and you're funding it, whether it's existing funds or new funds, they like to see that in the plan. Did we go far enough, I guess, is the question. Okay, so there's one more item at 1.8, and then after that, it goes into 2.0.
Okay.
Do you want us to take a look at the 1.8 item as well in terms of existing resources?
Yeah. Yes. It's only $5,000.
Yes,
I would-
$5,000.
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, I'm not comfortable spending $1 on special ed of supplemental concentration funds and a Common Core basic adoption. And so I can be, you know, obviously overruled on this, but I would urge you to also go back and see if you can find between the base grant and our core operating and our
Other
parcel
resources?
tax, other resources to cover those items.
But remember,
So
I thought I heard staff say that C, the RTI, was not for special ed.
That is correct, and that's what I was, that's exactly what I was going to ask,
Right.
clarification. So C is not for special ed, it's for general ed students. So is that, I mean, I just want to get clarification in terms of what your thinking is, Member Alpha.
I see.
And I felt the same way about the supplemental materials. I perceive those more for the RTI and the ELL students
That is correct.
than the special ed. They just sort of, you know,
The-
they get carried along.
Yeah, I think a few meetings ago, the main reason why we have, we want to emphasize students with special needs or special ed is because one of our parents who's on the district advisory committee emphasized that. I just want to make sure that the students don't get lost in the shuffle as well.
I think the issue of the funding for special ed is a little problematic because the total special ed budget is not sufficient to cover the cost of special ed as it is. So it does encroach on the general fund. So I mean, we could beat the bushes, but we know what the SELP is going to allocate to our district next year with 602 funds. And basically, there is a general fund contribution to ensure maintenance of effort. So there aren't too many, I guess what I'm saying is there really is not much of an option for that item.
Yeah, and the other reason why I ranked it so high is because I remember, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, Miss Lewis, Tracy Lewis, came up to the podium and said, and she actually pleaded to the board to get more intervention for those grade levels. So, I mean, there's definitely, that came from a teacher, so there has to be a need.
And I just need some direction from the board, because I also need to make sure I understand. I'm not sure I understand Member Affelt's comments. Are we proceeding to, are we going to proceed in the process we're engaged in tonight in terms of ranking, or are you suggesting something there? I just need some clarification from Member Affelt or the board. I'm not sure I understood what you were just saying. So we just went through a process where we ranked, where the board has ranked these. Are you suggesting that the board is not going to continue to in this process tonight?
I was making a comment on the ranking, which I understood to be the next step in this process, not let's add up the numbers and go.
And then have a qualitative conversation
Yes.
about the
Right.
relative numerical rankings.
Yes.
So,
And as part of that conversation, I don't feel comfortable spending, 68,000 of that money on. I think we absolutely should continue to provide the service, but I don't think it out of supplemental concentration dollars as a source. And you're correct that we shouldn't be spending special ed funds on this. But that means that, we have been providing these as part of our, core operating. It's not a new increased or improved service. It is.
I'm gonna disagree very strongly with Member Affelt, because I feel like this is exactly what we want to do. We're going to take general ed funds and start targeting kids who are behind in grade level, which means we're going to hit our ELLs, we're going to hit our free and reduced lunch, we're going to hit our foster youth, and we're going to really provide them extra RTI support from people who happen to be special ed teachers but are going to be acting as a general ed teacher. And the goal is twofold: one, to get them on grade level, and two, to keep them off of an IEP. And to me, that's exactly what we're doing here. We're targeting these students. Did I say that correctly?
That is correct. So it's not a service that is already provided.
Yeah.
What it is that it's a hit or miss. So if you have a teacher who happens to have
Okay, let
some
me stop you right there. My understanding was, and I could be mistaken, that and I support exactly this model, and it was explained very well to us by Dr. Steele, and we had this discussion about special ed versus. I understood that we had some compliance issues based on what we have done up to date with special ed dollars we have been spending on this service, and now we are supplanting those dollars with supplemental concentration. Now, if that's not what's happening, in fact, we're adding services, then
you're adding the service. What you're mixing up is Learning Center versus RTI. Learning Center is the model that Dr. Steele has presented before you, that you heard also from Ken Wyatt prior to that, and Sue Taylor, and where Mina Hutchins started. So that's Learning Center is very different from RTI. With the teachers and what Ms. Lewis came up earlier in the year is that in order to do intervention services, this is what they've tried to do, but the Learning Center model has to push back on that. What we want to provide is strictly a strong RTI framework and a model, and that's what we don't have. And it will be an additional service. Currently, we have what you call Learning Center, and in the Learning Center model, you kind of do some kind of hit or miss, but it's not a process that is that's very thorough, which is why we started to implement response to instruction and intervention.
so maybe you could clarify, Dr. Rubio, what the correspondence you were referring to earlier with the state about the use of these dollars.
Well, and I don't know that I have everything. I don't know that I understand the situation entirely, but if we have a model where we have one teacher who is able to provide services to students who are not special ed students, and we have other available teachers who our model is wanting to do that, and I don't know to what extent that's been happening or not, and I think that if I understand the RTI model we're proposing, and I may have misspoke earlier by calling it, because it's also a learning center model, I believe, but the extent to which, and I think Ms. Allen means hit or miss, the extent to which we've been doing that, and I don't know to what extent if I understand the problem correctly, we cannot do that. We can't continue to do it for any students, and we certainly can't do it for every each of the 4 teachers on a regular basis without being in a predicament with compliance.
So
if I understand the situation.
Yeah. So let's see if I can clarify this. Dr. Steele was told by a special ed consultant that in order for teachers, special ed teachers in the Learning Center to go into the regular classroom and provide services to non-special education students, but they're targeted students who are not meeting standard, they are probably almost always fall in the low-income student group, that in order to do that, the teachers who provide that service have to have some funding from non-special ed funds or from general ed funds. Prior to, or in the current year, one teacher, 40% of her salary is paid for from Title I funds, and the students who are non-special ed receiving her services are Title I eligible students. So we don't have a compliance issue there. Part of what I understand is this item came up as a priority on the list in light of the site council at Anna Yates wanting to redirect those Title I monies in order to support the potential of covering part of a salary of a technology teacher and a PE teacher. So Dr. Steele, his belief was if the Title I funds are not going to be available, it would prohibit the special ed teachers from serving any non-special ed students, and which defeats the whole purpose of the Learning Center concept. So
I now understand. That's part of the problem. So originally, RTI was already on the table from cabinet. And then on top of it, then the issue when the school site wasn't necessarily funding the one RSP teacher with Title I, that became another issue. So it's not necessarily that it goes together because one issue came up before the other, but the 25% RTI was an issue from September. So we've had meetings with the Learning Team Center, Ms. Lathan, et cetera. How can we provide more intervention to teachers? The Title I issue came up later when Dora started to create the budget and wanted to know like how should she create the budget and where the Title I funds come in, and that came in as a separate second issue. So it was just basically a compounded issue. So it was always we always wanted to address RTI because it wasn't done in the manner that it needs to be. Learning Center is more how do you have your special needs students push into classrooms? So your teachers are actually coming in and pushing in, providing support for your special ed teachers. RTI is very different process or framework or model. So I think what's happened is that they both are mixed up, but it was trying to figure out how can we solve all these problems, or the two conditions under, with LCAP.
So, and Dr. Pouts maybe actually, because of his professional position, may know the answer to this, but at least from my experience when I was previously involved in special ed, when I was a director of special ed, we were moving toward a full inclusion model, and in that model, it was touted, one of the reasons why that model was touted was because it would provide the special ed teacher and the aide the ability to work with non-special ed students in the regular classroom. And as I recall, I don't recall that it required that part of the funding for the special ed teacher come from general fund as opposed to special ed funds. So, so we called the State Department Special Ed Division, and there was no one there who can give me the answer to my very basic question. The basic question is, can a special ed teacher who goes into the regular classroom provide services to non-special ed students as well as special ed students? And I could not believe that I couldn't find a consultant there who could answer what I consider a very basic question of funding. It's a compliance issue. They are still researching it. They said they would get back to me, but the person I talked to said he needs to find someone else in the department who can answer that question. It's been 2 days, and I haven't heard back. So I don't, maybe Dr. Pat, since he works in that area, might know the answer to that, not to put him on the spot, but
You know, I'm just smiling because I love the idea that we're saying a special ed teacher isn't paid out of general ed funds. And the only time I ever hear that conversation is usually going the other way when we talk about special ed encroachment. Special ed teachers are paid out of general ed funds. It's part of the whole package. There is an issue. I think when we talk about this particular model, it's not, I'm providing this service, of course I can help a child who's sitting next to me. Here we're really designating students, and I would think of it more as, if a 5-period day is what a teacher at a high school teaches, 3 of those periods they're dealing with students with IEPs and meeting those IEP needs and goals. And IEPs are all about getting kids into general ed classes. That 5th period, or 4th and 5th period, they're pulling kids out to do intensive individualized instruction. And if you do that with a special ed teacher without an IEP, you're violating that family's rights and a bunch of issues beyond just the federal funding issues, because that service should not be available. Once you start designating them as instructional specialists and they're providing secondary supports, it becomes a general ed function and it's available to all kids. And that's what you're talking about, and that is taking those 2 periods a day. What we have right now are 4 fully staffed special ed teachers who have a dream caseload of very, very low numbers. So if you think about it in class size, they're doing 3 periods of special ed when they should have 10 kids in their class, and they really have closer to 5. And so instead of finding more special ed kids or getting rid of a teacher, we're going to give them an extra class, and they're going to see 5 or 10 general ed kids. These are the ways I'm picturing this in my head. Am I getting this? I'm getting a lot of nods from that table. Is that helping, Mr. Raffeld, at all, to think about it in those terms? So what we're actually doing is taking away from the special ed kids. Their ratios are going to go up, but these teachers are going to start serving, more children who are not yet identified as having a disability, and hopefully we never will.
And that is
Are
my
we
understanding.
pulling them out, or are we serving them in class?
I think it's going to be both, right?
Both, it's a combination, it is.
And are we doing that already this year, or are these additional?
It will be
services?
additional. So currently, right now, some teachers, they try to, but because of the way the funding is or the structure, and this is what we've been talking with Dr. Steele, Ms. Lathan, et cetera, is that it happens, some teachers may do it if they have time, but it's not a structured system. That's why we're trying to move to an RTI where it's very structured. So depending on the child's needs, in terms of intense intervention, you may, if you have enough students in a certain specific skill, you may actually pull 5 of them and you do intense intervention. Or it may be more beneficial to push in and gather the 4 or 3 in a small group in the classroom. So it really depends on the needs and what comes out in the assessments when you do formative assessments constantly with those students, and it's particularly for those students who are not meeting those benchmarks.
So to complexify it somewhat, if $40,000 of this problem was generated because the site council wanted to spend Title I dollars on 2 other priorities, which some of us ranked high, but in general did not get highly ranked. How does that implicate this item?
That is a good question. So I think part of it has to do with what the site council's authority is to approve the use of Title I funds. And I don't know, Ms. Al, I'm not going to even.
Well, I know the answer to that, and they ultimately it's a recommendation that the board can accept or reject, and typically boards almost always accept, but the board is empowered to reject their recommendation, say we're going to spend it differently, and I believe you have to identify in writing and explain to the site council why you did that. But the board ultimately decides how to spend the Title I money.
So assuming that is the case, I don't have any reason to doubt that that's not the case, then we could assume that since neither of the 2 positions that the site council was going to allocate or redirect Title I funds for next year, which means that the 40,000 Title I monies are available. But of course, Dr. Steele's part of her concern also is being able to serve more students, more targeted students. So you could say that if the 40,000 went and was restored, that provided the ed specialist to serve targeted but non-special ed students, the cost, the 20% cost of 68,000 could actually be reduced to 10% or half that cost to 34,000, which would increase the capacity of those 4 teachers to serve more students who do not have IEPs. And I think the only reason why I think this is so important, besides the concept of learning center, is that Anna Yates, for as great a job as the teachers do there, they have very little in the way of intervention programs. And so, but if you're a student with an IEP because you're eligible for special ed, you do get the service of special ed teachers. But it's the other students who don't meet the eligibility requirements for special ed, who are coming from the targeted groups and who are not meeting standard, that we're asking the regular classroom teachers to differentiate instruction, to attempt to address the needs of those students, and it's a challenge for them to do it on their own. And so this is where the educational specialist can be helpful, because if I'm a classroom teacher and I'm doing English language arts and I've broken my class into 3 small groups based upon the needs the groups have, but there may be those 3, 4, 5 students who need more intensive support, that the special ed teachers in my classroom and or the aide, they can provide the targeted support to those students that I'm not going to be able to get to. So when you have a school that doesn't have a wide range, doesn't have a lot of intervention programs, and we're asking teachers to differentiate in order to meet the needs of students who are not meeting standards, it's very difficult for a regular classroom teacher to do that without some support. So Dr. Steele's hope is that we can expand the ability of the ed specialists to be able to serve a larger number of students who don't have IEPs. So if the board were inclined to say, okay, we think the Title I money should be redirected back to support that effort in order to increase the capacity to address more students, I would still recommend that then half, instead of 20% of their time, 10% of their time be supported from supplemental concentrated grants, which would expand their ability significantly to address the needs of more students. And the cost would be, cost would be half of 68,000.
But do we know that the school site council may not come back and, have another priority with that $40,000, that they have freed up now? See, I know, we don't know. That would be the issue.
We don't even have a plan for it, right?
We do.
It's not in the next agenda.
So, that's just a thought.
Yeah,
But as Member Atfield said, we always have the authority to overrule and, put those dollars toward that use.
And let me be clear, I think we should honor the site council's priority.
I agree. So until we know
Well,
if
I
they're
mean,
going to be prioritized,
but just to,
I think we move on.
I just have to add, I think the challenge here is that we have an LCAP, we have an SSC, we have a number of, places or priorities or even wants, and desires. So I think we can only do as much as we can, and I don't think I agree with what you said. I think in most instances we have the ability to do it, but when we're faced with a list of 23 things, it just may be the case that some things don't shake out to be in favor of the recommendation that's been provided to the board. So I agree. I just wanted to say that. I do agree, but I think we do have a challenge in front of us where we have a number of things. And just from a philosophical standpoint, for me, in terms of how I ranked a lot of these things in those 2 positions, one of them is that I think in some instances it's more of it could be a management issue as it relates to PE. And it could be another resource that we haven't looked at. And I think a lot of it has to do with considering where does in terms of the tech teacher, why the parcel tax couldn't pay for that, but what is it not gonna pay for? I mean, I think that's so you know where my thinking was, just as it relates to this prioritization process. So I mean, I just had to say that. But yeah. So, where are we?
So I think, let me just throw out a thought for board reaction. We do need to revise the LCAP. I think, again, some of Member Affel's recommendations, we can make the revisions to the LCAP. But we need to make revisions to get it ready to present before you for approval next Wednesday in the form and manner that the county is expecting it, which means they want us to take out all the things that are not proposed to be funded or for when funding will continue, and we have to make sure we address the 8 priorities. So, so based on what the consensus was this evening, we may have to go back and add some areas to make sure all 8 state priorities are addressed. But the board, and then we have to adjust the general fund budget to reflect the expenditure, pros expenditures. You know, Mr. Bonet did not put those in the budget draft because the decision hasn't been made yet. The board may consider the adoption of the LCAP plan and then the adoption of the general fund budget with some stipulations. And the stipulations are around the items for which there are still some questions that we just can't possibly answer by Wednesday. And the ed specialist one is an example of one. If the board were to adopt the plan to spend the $68,000, for example, to supplement the ed specialist compensation so that they legally can address the needs of non-special ed students, that it is approved with the condition that the district look for other sources of funding, including Title I, that can be utilized to increase the level of services, but at the same time free up supplemental grant money. So in other words, we can for some of the, and the professional development one is a little problematic anyway, because we don't really know what that amount is. And we're not going to know what that amount is by Wednesday night. Same with the science teacher position. Until we actually hire someone, we know what the amount is. So in some ways, you're approving the proposed action and services at a dollar amount that doesn't exceed $241,000, so that the county on the fiscal review side will say, okay, district, we're looking at this and we agree you can afford this, but then the board can make adjustments as soon as clarification is received on some of these items, and it could be certainly as soon as August or September. It depends on the item, of course. And at that point, Dr. Rubio and staff could come back to you and say, okay, so in response to the 4 items the board approved originally, here is the current status of this. Here's what the actual real cost is, and is either used all the money or it's freed up some additional funding that the board can now go back and consider the other priorities. But at least it will allow us to get the plan into the county, get their approval, and then allow the board to make revisions to the plan.
And if there is some money that's freed up and we could fund another priority, we can always do that before first interim.
Yeah, the first interim. I would hope that the board can do that much sooner than that, because you're not going to get the first interim until
I said
December.
before. I said before
so
first interim. Right.
Hopefully well before.
Okay.
Well, the county has to August 15th to, they do something with the budget by then, right? Don't they approve budgets by August 15th?
Right, 45
45
days
days.
after, 45 days after the governor approved the budget.
Yeah.
45 days from today.
Right. They have till August 15th to also give us feedback and considerations on the LCAP. And
Same time frame.
on those pieces, yes, they're aligned. They have to October 8th to finally approve the LCAP one way or another. Presumably, that means they say, hey, did you think about this, that, or the other thing on August 15th? And we say, yes, but we're still going to do what we want to do, or you're right, we should change that. So there is a little bit of time before,
Right.
you know, October 8th. And I now,
Make changes.
frankly, I don't know. I don't think they would object, but I don't know if, you know, you come back and you go, wait a minute, we want to do this instead of that. Can you, it's not kind of built for that, but it, I would think that
I
they'd
feel
be
like we
okay.
should be able to do that.
I would think so too.
Yeah, at least be able to add. Yeah.
As long as it all pencils out.
If it's not a major change
Right.
to the plan, I don't think that that should be an issue.
Okay.
Where am I? So we have, so you know what you're doing with this list. 'Cause
I think we
this
should
list is a
recap the
lot.
list for the purposes of the revisions we
'Cause
make
it's
to the
about $1
plan
million
and the
on
budget.
that list right there.
But my recommendation to the board is that you direct staff to revise that plan and the general fund budget in accordance with those priorities, with the condition that for each of the items that the board has given a high rating for, maybe with the exception of the full-time science position, because I don't think there's anything particularly tied to that. But I think for, so we have the full-time science teacher, we're looking at blue color, right? Okay. We have, was that the only item at 1.2?
That's the only one.
Okay. And then we have provide educational specialist access. We have supplemental reading materials. I think that was a $15,000 item. We have the professional development piece. So I would say for the supplemental reading materials, after Wednesday, staff will go back and look at the budgets to see if there's other sources of dollars that could be used for this besides supplemental concentrated grant. So I would assume that that would be a condition the board would make in approving this, that staff return to the board to determine whether there's any other base grant money that can be used to purchase these materials for next year. The other item at 1.4 is the professional development piece, and that goes without saying that
Same thing.
you're approving the concept. When we submit it to the county, we will make sure that the amount that is put in the application for the county does not, that the amount passes the fiscal review portion of the reading of the grant. Because if we put more in there on the high side, they'll say, well, you don't have that much money to spend for that. So, but the condition upon that item is for the staff to come back to the board as soon as a clear determination can be made as to the cost, and at the same time that the staff examine all of the district's base grant money to determine whether there's other dollars that have been used for professional development that could be redirected to address this, which if we identify those monies, it should free up some supplemental concentrated grant money. So I think those are the items for which I would recommend the board approve with those conditions, and that staff would bring back updated information.
I guess another question I had is on the for every new staff person, and is it only the science teacher that's new up there? Well, part-time EL teacher is the new, are the two new staff persons?
Oh, the positions. Huh?
Yeah, the new positions.
The only staff positions that had a average score of less than 2.0
No, I'm just, yeah, go ahead.
would be the full-time science
Right.
position,
I think the part-time EL.
part-time EL
Right.
teacher,
That's it, huh?
the internship work experience is a stipend, proposed as a stipend position. That's not a personnel position.
Yeah.
Those are the only
Yeah,
two,
so-
actually.
I mean, those, as you said, are budgeted at the high end of what we would hire someone at.
Yes.
Right. So, I
would
don't know what's common, but it seems like that in budgeting, you put it in the middle or something, or a little towards above the middle,
Well,
but
the
not always at the high end.
Yeah, and But I think for the purpose of this exercise, since the dollar amount that we have maximum available is a defined dollar amount, just to be safe, we felt it was prudent to err on the side of potentially the highest. From my personal experience, not just here, but when I was personnel director, it's not common to hire someone from the outside who comes in at 10 years of experience and has maximum units, because they are folks who are too vested in their districts, and they tend not to move after 10 years because they're higher up on the salary schedule. Now, if we had the highest salary schedule in the whole county, you'd have a greater possibility that you might have a person like that come from another district, because if they get 10 years of credit and they're going to come here and make $8,000, $10,000 more, they may be willing to make that change. We're not one of those districts. So I think if we ask Ms. Harrell, what's been the average placement on the salary schedule for the last 10 teachers we've hired, I would venture guess it's going to be somewhere more in the middle or the low middle. But we didn't feel comfortable in recommending to the board a dollar amount without knowing for sure, because the next thing that happens, there's a tremendous teacher that is committed to working with our students, wants to come here, and they'll come over for a lateral move in salary, but then it's going to be higher than what we, so I mean, I think that with the science position, I know Dr. Balfe has interviewed a number of people, has a pretty good sense of where they would come in at, and not to put you on the spot, but when you're looking at the candidates, and the candidates that are pretty good.
The ones that we've been finding that have the right credential, actually, we had one turn us down because we couldn't put her high enough on the salary schedule. So, so it's very hard to know, but there's a number of them who are out there who have unusual circumstances where they're doing some moving around, and if they've got experience and some education, they're going to come in at the higher end, even if it's not the very top.
And at least for that position, since we have to have the teacher in place
We'll
for the
know
start of
by
school, you'll know
August or something.
probably prior to September 1 what the actual dollar cost is for that position. So it's, you know, it's either you're not going to be able to identify extra money, or you will be able to identify extra money, but we ought to know by September 1st.
And I think, I mean, the beauty, the advantage of this kind of exercise is that if we do come in below, then we have some other rankings and some other priorities we can just, boom, go ahead and fund. So.
I do want to share with my fellow board members that I don't particularly like this list. That it's not, you know, I respect it's your priorities. I like the science teacher, and you know, I mean, I like everything on this list, but I was disappointed not to see greater interest and support in a PE teacher or the tech teacher. We've been hearing also from Ms. Lewis and others
Other teachers.
that we need a PE teacher at Annie Yates, and that it is a drain on our current staff to do that.
Well,
and we've adopted a tech thrust, and we don't have a tech teacher. So those are my disappointments.
And just so the board knows, I certainly have some strong, how would I say this? I feel very empathetic, I think, because I know the teachers don't have enough time to do everything. And I totally understand the rationale for the requests and the positions. So, and I mean that. I don't know if that was it wasn't honestly my first reaction when I heard about some of the positions, but as I've thought about it and heard from more teachers, I do get the sincerity of their feelings that wouldn't it be great to have someone to do that, and it would be to do some of these other parts of their job that are traditionally done by the teacher themselves. So I just wanted to share that I agree with you with the importance. I'll share one more thing with you just for added information. I did get a response again from 96% of our teachers, K-12, on the number of questions, and one of the questions was, if you had to choose between positions and you had to choose between professional development that was well done, which would you do? Or which do you think makes more of a difference for student achievement? Straight down the middle, just about 50%, 50%. So I feel like at the very least we have a combination of things here tonight, and it's not everything everybody wants, and I wish we could provide that, but we have a combination of both. But I did want to let you know that, because as you know, I feel the need to make sure I get a response from everybody when I ask particular questions, so we have accurate data. So in asking all teachers in Emory, except for 2 who have not responded yet, it is pretty split down the middle on that question in terms of what will best impact student achievement.
So I guess my question would be to staff to at least take a look at this, is what kind of, I guess maneuvering can we do to somehow get a PE teacher, at NEH? I mean, that would be my ask, because I want to see a PE teacher there as well. I mean, I'm an ex-athlete. I want to see kids, have physical exercise. And that was going to be, really my question, if this position did not get high priority. Is there anything internally that we can, and I'm not actually to answer it now, more like, if you can go back and look at how can we somehow facilitate a PE teacher?
I'm hesitant to do that only because of this reason. I want to be respectful to so far, unless you're instructing me not to, which I also will do. But I'm assuming at the moment that the staff is going to follow the priorities for us. So if you do a one-off,
I'm not saying additional funding. I'm not
no, I know, but I just want to
Okay.
communicate that I do also want to be respectful of the process that the entire board just went through. So I just want to caution us that I will do as instructed by the board. But at the same time, I just want to remind you that we just went through this process, and I don't know whether if that position is on the next level of priorities. Absolutely, I have no problem. But I just want to mention that to you, just because while it is important, it is in the conversation space that we're having right now. We could have the same conversation about just about anything on the wall. So I just want to be careful about what direction you're giving me, and I want clarity.
But those priorities were what should we do with our supplemental concentration money? And if you had a different question, like, what should we next do with base or grant or something?
I was
which
going to say,
is
with some of the other things that we were talking about, trying to find other resources or
So-
other alternatives to fund. That's all I was
So
talking about.
let me speak this. I want to try to say this so that I'm not committing Dr. Rubio to a particular course of action.
Yeah, it's one of those.
But he knows where I live, so. So the only way the board will know this is for the board to participate in an exercise that goes through the general fund budget, department by department,
Yes.
site by site, and for the board to know
Where the money are.
what you're, I hate to put it in these terms, what you're buying with the dollars you have. Because only when the board does that exercise will you be able to decide, you know what, that's a great program, but quite frankly, we as a board believe we should do this.
Right.
So we want the staff to make a shift or plan on making a shift of dollars spent for this versus something else. Now, I've been through many, many budget adoptions, and depending on who's on the board, I get different direction from the board on how to do the study sessions. I have done study sessions where the board actually asked each budget manager to sit in front of the board like a corporate department head would have to go to the board of directors and to justify his or her proposed budget for next year. We did that. We did that twice in the prior district I was in, and after doing it 2 times, the board said, nah, we don't need to do that anymore because we now know where the money is and where the money's going for. Most boards adopt budgets like the practice is here. Your CBO presents, the budget on the revenue side, what are the categories of income, what are the categories for expenditure side, here's the ending fund balance, the components of the balance, here's the multi-year projection where we're going to look. And that's pretty much the common approach most boards take. In this district, because you're small, it would not be a bad idea for the board to be involved in the exercise where you go through the entire base grant in terms of what it's funding so you know where the dollars are going, particularly in light of some of these other priorities. But so you can't, So if you're going to make a decision to redirect existing dollars that are all committed, then you'll be able to do that in the context of what the board's priorities are for the direction for the district. Obviously in consultation with your superintendent. So, again, because the reality of next Wednesday we have to adopt general fund budget, I think that's an exercise for next year. And the practical reality is, if you decide at some future point to redirect dollars, since 85 to 87% of this district's general fund dollars go for salary and benefits, and you want to change direction on a particular program, you're going to have to give March 15th letters or other ways of releasing staff if that's what it requires to move, to implement new programs. That's not always the case, obviously. Depends on credentials and all of those things, so.
Joy got a comment.
I'd like to respond to quite a few things that were said and partly what you said, Afel. Oh, I'm sorry, it is on. I'm just not speaking into it. Sorry. Not one of those things do I feel are not important. And I struggled with prioritizing, partly because I'm indecisive, but partly because I don't want to say that one thing is more important than the other. But when I sit there and I think about what staff have said, I mean, staff have said every single one of those things is needed. And we've heard not only from staff and myself and Dr. Sugiyama tonight that bandwidth is a real issue here. If we only have this one pot of money this year, we have to figure out what we think is going to be the most important and have the biggest effect. And that's how I looked at it. It's like, what's going to have the biggest effect on the student outcome? And that's how I went through this list. Not saying that any of those things are less important than the next. And I think that as we go through, like you said, we're probably not going to pay the science teacher the top dollar. So we can make revisions as we go forward, and we know what's next on our list. But I don't know, I hear your frustration, and I just want you to know that it wasn't, I didn't look at it in anything like, that's not important. So it's just, it struggles of like, which one do you put above the other?
So I think we have a pattern, or a path, correct? You have you've outlined a step. And
Yeah, so
more or
the
less.
task for staff by the end of the day Monday is to be able to get to you, because the agenda for next Wednesday has been posted already. That's correct. And
Yep.
have the attachments for the
correct.
general fund been posted as well? And so what's going to happen is we're going to have to, probably with the LCAP plan, we'll have to give you a whole brand new revised version. And with the general fund budget, I talked to Mr. Bonet today, and to the extent that the general fund should reflect the funding priorities for LCAP for this coming year with those conditions, and we will frame those in the suggested motion that the board make. So it's a matter of record that there's to be, the staff's to come back to the board when clarity is reached on those items we talked about. That will give you errata sheets on the general fund budget just for the pages that reflect the changes. So I think the general fund budget document as attached to your board agenda that got posted today is the only changes will be to those pages. Now, I just want to make sure Dora is okay with this, but I think the only change, we'll just give you the sheets that have the changes on them that reflect the proposed expenditures that you can replace and insert in your budget document. But I think the LCAP changes, I mean, I think Member Affel's list of suggestions that we received, and we looked at the list and we said, oh yes, we can make this change or we can make this adjustment. We're going to go ahead and make those, and then get the plan ready. Try to get it to you Monday late afternoon so that you'll have time to look at it Tuesday, Wednesday, and then, but we're going to get it ready in submittable form to the county so that we can submit it to them by June 30.
Um, so the question that I had, which I emailed you, and I don't think you got to, Dr. Singh, it was about the comment, because as Mr. Gibb was noting, the law requires the superintendent to respond in writing to comments, any written comments from the DLAC in particular, or the parent advisory committee. So it does kind of presume that the parent advisory committee and the DLAC have been provided an opportunity to understand these decisions and what's in the LCAP and to comment. So how are we going to accomplish that between now
So
and
Monday afternoon, after we finish what we think is maybe the final draft, is to send it out to the members, and then usually what Ms. Quadier does is she calls each and every one of them to make sure that they actually check their email, because everyone doesn't necessarily check their email every day. So anytime we've had something, she'll make a phone call, as well as we'll send something out to them. So what they basically have seen is the priorities, and so it's been, I think what they've been waiting on is basically what will be the top priorities that the board will select, so they can give feedback on that.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, any support that you can provide to them to understand, I don't know if you're planning on having a meeting or a conference call or a mass email, or I don't know, but it seems like we need to be able to help people understand what's in there.
Yeah, I actually, of course, coming into this very late, I had actually the opportunity to sit in for an hour on, that was the DLAC committee? Parent Advisory Committee. And there were about, I'd say 6 parents there maybe. And it was an hour before I was due at the city council for a city council meeting, but I had a chance to sit in for an hour. I actually was pretty impressed with their knowledge of what, of course, they were looking at a long list of potential priorities. I was pretty impressed with their level of understanding regarding the items that were on the list. So, I mean, and that was only with the Parent Advisory Committee, not necessarily not with DLAC, but at least for the parents on that committee, I thought I left there thinking, wow, they really understand what these items are. So.
I think with DLAC, I met separately with the top 4 officers. And at that parent advisory committee, unfortunately, Mr. Gibb wasn't at that one, that John was at, because that's what I've been telling us, that we're waiting for somebody, the superintendent, to sort of come in so they can kind of go through the process and hear that. So that's what John provided. But I guess we can send out an email, follow up with a phone call, but I don't know if we can, if there's, what you're asking to see if we can come up with the meeting before Wednesday. Is that?
If they would like, I guess, at a minimum, if make that offer to them and brief them on it and get their feedback. If they don't feel the need, then I don't want to make extra work for you all.
Sure. I mean, minimally, we need to respond in writing to any questions, if I understand correctly, but we can make that offer, I think, as well for Tuesday.
Okay, great. And then I guess, since you mentioned the DLAC, and we did prioritize professional development, one of my comments to you was around making sure that we specify in the LCAP that we are talking about professional development for English language development and SEDAI, and that Mr. Gibb mentioned it again tonight, was a priority for the DLAC, and the issue that I didn't. It seems like most of the professional development we're talking about is just general Common Core for all teachers in English language arts and math. And in terms of the actual dollars that you're going to go back and look at and work through on the PD point, can we flush out like what the cost of the professional development for SEDAI will be? And if we can make sure that if we can do that and tell the DLAC, this is in the plan, it's captured, and here are the costs, I think that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I think would be helpful. So right before school was out, I met with the instructional leadership team, at least at Annie Yates, and so Ms. Clone was going over the PD plan. And what we've decided is that EOD and SEDAI will be a part of writing this year. So it's not everything, it's just a part of writing in Common Core, number 1. And then 2, Ms. Miller will have a few days in terms of at each staff. So looking through, again, the plan is just not, I mean, when you look at all the Thursdays, there are some Thursdays where it's just one because of all the holidays. So we looked at every Thursday from September until June, and so we plugged her in in terms of like 2 or 3 times. So technically that will be a no cost because it will happen on their Thursdays unless what Dr. Rubio has even in the Common Core, basically, I mean, over the, what she's noticed, and at a lot of the staff who actually delivers PD, you just don't have enough time in the day. So we've tried the substitutes, we've tried, you know, the Saturdays, we've tried the after school, and so hopefully if this model works, we'll be able to add funding to it. But right now, currently, what we have is we just use our Thursdays and our Wednesdays, which is really a no cost, and Ms. Miller will come in and do and have PD and also incorporate it when we implement the writing Common Core.
Yeah. So maybe if we're buying days, the not 8 or 7 or whatever you can negotiate before, so if one of those can be on Sedai, for example, then that would be great. In addition to the no-cost approach, which is really great.
Okay. Think we're clear? All right, and because, so the district office is closed to the board on Monday. Let's see, and I have an agenda somewhere. All right, so that would then conclude our study session on LCAP, unless there's members of the public that have a comment they'd like to include in there, which is great. All right, so we'll now actually go into closed session and report out following that. Thank you.
Good job, gang.